east. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. On the M60 in Greater Manchester, there are 2 lanes closed clockwise where someone's broken down between junctions 22 and 23 from Failsworth to Ashton-under-Lyne, causing queues, with delays not helped by an earlier accident along that stretch. In Nottinghamshire, the A60 is closed each way along Mansfield Road at Ravenshead after an accident, with queues back to the A614 as you divert. Now, in Leicestershire, the A50 is closed each way along High Cross Street in Leicester because of an unsafe building. Buses replaced trains between Shrewsbury and Birmingham New Street because of flooding. In Cardiff, the A4232 is blocked eastbound by an accident just after the A48 at Culverhouse Cross, with queues from the M4. And in Wiltshire, the A303 is closed each way off the A350 at Chicklade after a lorry caught fire.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
This week, Free Speech Brighton, a sister group of the Free Speech Union, claimed that they were kicked out of a pub in the city for discussing trans issues in schools. The group booked a room in a pub for an evening of speeches and discussion when they claimed security guards came and asked them to leave after one speaker began to talk about this topic. Now, a clip of the evening was in fact posted to social media. Can you give us some background to what happened, what the event was for, and why you booked it?
Our normal pub was being refurbished, so about 3 weeks ago I went in and booked a local pub for a meeting, and they didn't ask any questions about what sort of meeting. It was in a back room. It was mainly secluded from the rest of the pub, so I thought it would be fine. But anyway, they didn't ask any questions. They took my booking. We arrived, I set up. The first speaker started speaking, who's a retired teacher who is concerned about trans in schools and how that affects children. But she was talking purely about children. She was not talking about adults who have protected characteristics, obviously. And then towards the end of her speech, I became aware of security guards standing behind me in the middle room. So I went to have a quick word with them and see what they wanted. And they said, we've had a complaint. And I said, what's the complaint? And they wouldn't say. Then they said, will you come and talk to the landlord? So I went to the front of the bar and they indicated this chap was the landlord, but he looked about 20, so I don't think he was the landlord. So I said, I hear you have a complaint about us. Can you tell me what it is? And he couldn't.
That sounds very Kafka-esque, as though you've committed a crime, but they can't tell you what the crime is.
Well, that's what I couldn't understand, because, you know, obviously they can't tell you who the complainant is, but they should be able to tell you what the complaint is.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good morning, it's 9:30 on Monday the 30th of September, live across the UK. This is Britain's Newsroom with me, Andrew Hayes. I'm at the Tory conference in Birmingham, aren't I the lucky one? And Bev Turner in London.
Good morning, thank you for joining us. So, is maternity pay excessive? Tory leadership contender Kemi Badenoch is under fire for suggesting that pay has gone too far, but she then says that her comments have been misrepresented.
I've been a Minister for Women and Equalities. I've had 3 children. I've had maternity leave 3 times. I don't need anyone to tell me about maternity pay. I've been one of the people fighting for that, and I won't have my views misrepresented.
And energy price hike. As it gets colder outside, your energy bills are set to rise by 10% at midnight. Will you be forced to restrict your energy use this winter? And is there BBC bias? The broadcaster has been accused of being institutionally hostile to Israel by 3 Jewish organisations over its coverage of the conflict in the Middle East. A former BBC controller joins me to discuss that very shortly. And more expensive booze in Scotland. The minimum unit price for alcohol has increased by 30% in an attempt to lose the title of Scotland being the drink death capital of the UK. Will it make any difference? And working with Andrew Monday to Thursday just clearly isn't enough for me. Find out about our Saturday afternoon together at Henley Literary Festival.
And I'm here at the Tory conference. Gosh, how can I confuse it? It's not exactly like it was at the Labour conference last week. By this time last week, Labour conference was rammed. It's a bit more like a ghost town here. This is the Tory party in opposition. We saw Rishi Sunak briefly yesterday. He's been and gone. And now all eyes are focused on Kemi Badenoch after that row she got into over to maternity pay. She'll be doing a hustings later on with Tom Tugendhat. I'll be in there for that. But of course, we want to hear what you think. Send your views and post your comments by visiting gbnews.com/your say. But first, here's the news with Mark White.
Good morning. The main headlines at 9:32. As Andrew and Beth just mentioned at the top of their programme, the Tory leadership contender Kemi Badenoch has defended comments she made over the level of maternity pay, saying her remarks have been misinterpreted. It follows an interview in which the Shadow Housing Secretary appeared to suggest the allowance could be seen as excessive. But Ms Badenoch hit back, calling for an honest campaign.
I've been a Minister for Women and Equalities. I've had 3 children. I've had maternity leave 3 times. I don't need anyone to tell me about maternity pay. I've been one of the people fighting for that, and I won't have my views misrepresented.
Meanwhile, the race to replace Rishi Sunak as Tory party leader takes centre stage at the Conservative Party conference in Birmingham today. A day after the former Prime Minister urged the party to stop squabbling, 2 of the leadership contenders, Kemi Badenoch and Tom Tugendhat, will face a question and answer session. James Cleverly and Robert Jenrick, the other 2 candidates, will face questions on Tuesday. The Lebanese Prime Minister has said up to 1 million people have been displaced as fighting between Israel and the terror group Hezbollah continues. Overnight, Israeli airstrikes targeted central Beirut for the first time. The terror group, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, said 3 of its leaders were killed in the strikes. Meanwhile, Hamas said its leader in Lebanon has been killed, along with some members of his family, in an airstrike overnight in southern Lebanon. The UK's biggest steelworks is ending production today after more than a century of operations. Blast Furnace 4 is the final furnace operating at Tata Steel's plant in Port Talbot. From today, it'll be shut down, putting around 2,000 people out of work. The works will enter a transition phase for the next 3 years until a new electric arc furnace is installed. The legendary country music singer and actor Chris Christopherson has died at the age of 88. A family spokesperson said the star passed away peacefully at his home in Hawaii on Saturday. He won 3 Grammys for Best Country Song, Help Me Make It Through the Night, and starred alongside Barbra Streisand in the 1976 film A Star Is Born, for which he won a Golden Globe. The Duke of Sussex is making a rare visit to the UK today to celebrate the achievements and resilience of seriously ill youngsters and their families. Prince Harry will attend the Well Child Awards ceremony in London in his role as the charity's patron, a position he's held for more than 15 years. The King is believed to be spending time in his Balmoral home, and it's thought he has not seen Harry since the Duke rushed to his father's side after the King's cancer diagnosis in February. We're right up to date with the latest headlines. I'm back with more in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good morning, welcome to Britain's Newsroom, live across the UK on GB News. I am Bev Turner, I am in London. Andrew Pearce is at the Tory Party conference in Birmingham. Andrew, Kemi Badenoch is having to defend herself this morning, isn't she, about these comments that she made over maternity pay and whether it was just a gotcha by the reporter or whether she does have a problem with women being paid what she may be termed excessive maternity pay.
You know, she was doing an interview here in the conference centre on the radio, and I was standing watching her, and I heard exactly what she said, and I thought, did she really just say that? There's no doubt she gave the distinct impression she thinks maternity pay is excessive. What is it? You get 90% of your pay for the first 6 weeks, and then it falls back. I mean, from what I read, we've got one of the lowest maternity rates of pay in Europe. If she'd said, look, this is a really onerous problem for people who run a very small business, you'd sort of got it, but she was talking about the problems of statutory maternity pay, which is paid by the government. So she's now saying that she's been misrepresented. Look, I don't think she was, Bev. I think what she said, I heard it, and you've either got to stick to your guns, but don't blame the messenger. That doesn't work. This is a woman who likes to be saying, I tell it straight. That is part of her shtick. She shoots from the hip. Well, she shot from the hip, but she missed.
Well, it's £183 a week for women now to have maternity pay, which, let's face it, doesn't go very far at the moment, particularly with everything being so expensive in the UK. I just want to talk to you a little bit as well, Andrew, about what happened at the weekend with the Rosie Duffield resignation from Labour, because if we'd have been on air that day, we'd have been talking about that. I mean, that was huge for Rosie Duffield, for such a significant member of the Labour Party, to leave with such an excoriating attack on Keir Starmer. I didn't see that coming in quite those terms. Did you?
No, and I've seen resignation letters in my time, but that was one of the most devastating. She really went for him. She juxtaposed the two issues of taking taking winter fuel allowance away from some of our poorest pensioners with a Prime Minister who's incredibly well paid, who's taken tens of thousands of pounds in freebies. And we've only learnt this weekend, Bev, just how much generosity there's been from Lord Ali. Lord Ali, he spent £32,000 on clothes, did Keir Starmer, from Lord Ali. So she's really gone for him over that. And I don't think in modern politics there's ever been an MP who's jumped ship from their governing party so soon after a general election. It's an astonishing thing. It's happened within the first 90 days of a Labour government, and it's a huge blow to Keir Starmer's authority. And that criticism, he runs a blokes club, a boys club, is very telling, because remember, Rosie Duffield is very keen that women-only spaces should be protected. She's in the same camp as you and J.K. Rowling, and of course Keir Starmer has been frankly all over the place on that issue. When he was asked, can only a woman have a cervix? It's not a straightforward question. It is. So it's a big blow for Labour, and it just shows his problem. He's discovering very quickly that governing the country is nothing like as easy as being leader of the opposition.
OK. All right, Andrew, you will be talking to some really significant MPs and guests up there in Birmingham as the show goes on between now and midday. We'll talk to you in just a little while. But moving on, three prominent Jewish groups, the Board of Deputies of British Jews, the Jewish Leadership Council and the Community Security Trust have all backed a report saying that the BBC's coverage of the Middle East conflict is institutionally hostile to Israel. Well, I'm delighted to say that we're going to talk now to Danny Cohen, who's former BBC executive, former controller of BBC One and author of this report. Danny, good to see you. Thank you for joining us this morning. So, you know, we're looking over at Iran now. Everybody is on tenterhooks, effectively. The situation is incredibly febrile in the Middle East and where this might go. So some might say, what does it matter, Danny Cohen, as how the BBC portrays this? Isn't it more important to what's happening as opposed to how it's being discussed?
Well, we all know how it's happening by how it's reported. So the way it's reported is absolutely critical to our understanding of what's going on in the Middle East. And the BBC is a very trusted news source, and it has a commitment to impartiality and a commitment to accuracy. And what this report shows today is that the BBC is consistently and systematically showing bias against Israel and failing in its duty to impartiality. And this matters for a very, very specific reason. The reason it matters is because that has a real-world impact on the Jewish community in the UK. When the BBC lacks impartiality on Israel, Jewish people feel it in the UK in a growth in anti-Semitism, a growth in anti-Semitic incidents, and problems in their lives. So that's why it matters, and that's why those three community organisations have endorsed today's report, and indeed the Chief Rabbi has done so as well.
You were controller of BBC One, Danny, for 3 years. You've always been a significant member of the British media as well. So was this occurring to you? Were you watching? Have you been watching the BBC coverage of this unfolding? And kind of with your head in your hands, just on a personal level as a Jewish man as well, and therefore felt you needed to author this report to bring together your own personal experience, but also your professional experience?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, I first wrote about the problems with BBC coverage the day after the massacre of 7th of October, when the BBC refused to refer to the Hamas terrorists as terrorists. And I've been writing about it actually in the Daily Telegraph since, pointing out the failures in the BBC's coverage and the impact that's having on the Jewish community. And that ranges from mistakes and very inaccurate reporting to the crucial things that the BBC leaves out. More often than not, the BBC does not describe Hamas or indeed Hezbollah as prescribed terrorist organizations. And often they make mistakes in their reporting that they then do not correct. And that has a big impact because we know the BBC is trusted around the world. So what it says, what it puts on its website travels a long way.
Why, Danny? Why is this happening? Is it just young journalists maybe that don't always get the balance right, or is it something more pernicious than that and it is deliberate propaganda?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, in my view, the problem is bottom up and top down. So you've got individual journalists who are bringing their own bias into the newsroom, who are not reflecting stories fairly and accurately when it comes to their representation of Israel. But you've also got BBC bosses who are not willing to accept there's a problem, continually push back and say there's nothing to see here, you're all wrong about this. Well, I think maybe when 3 community organizations, the chief rabbi, jointly address this, perhaps it's time to start listening. And one thing that's very interesting this morning, Beverly, is that I've been interviewed on a number of radio programs this morning. The only people who haven't had time for an interview have been the BBC. And I think that, again, expresses their lack of transparency, their lack of willingness to engage with this issue and really understand the impact it's having on the Jewish community.
So what kind of response do you get if you go to, say, Tim Davie and you put this report on Tim's desk? What is his comeback? Does he just say that you're wrong, or that there are 2 sides to this story, and that if he was to have an Islamic-based report, that it would come to a different conclusion? What's the response?
Well, I'm hoping that Tim Davie, the board of the BBC, they'll read this report. It's a 60-page detailed report. They'll read it. They'll see that there is a consistent pattern there. They'll acknowledge there's a problem and deal with it. And you can't deal with the problem unless you acknowledge it. And so far, the BBC has been reluctant to do so. And I think that's been about defending reputation has become more important than their commitment to accuracy and transparency and impartiality. And that's the real problem here, because I think the BBC are more concerned about how they look to the world than dealing with an issue. BBC Arabic is a very good example of this. There have been huge issues in BBC Arabic's presentation of this war. We've seen BBC Arabic journalists celebrate the deaths and the killing and the terrorism of 7th of October. We've seen BBC Arabic reports which actually question whether the massacre at Kfar Azar happened. We've seen BBC Arabic use sources which are proven to be Hamas and Islamic Jihad supporters. And when you ask the BBC about that, their response in BBC Arabic is it retains the same standards as the rest of the BBC, and we're very proud of it. And to me, that's just gaslighting of the Jewish community, because it's very clear that the BBC Arabic has significant problems of bias against Israel. But even in that context, BBC management won't admit there's a problem.
OK, all right, Danny, good to see you. Danny Cohen, former BBC executive and author of the report, and a significant voice in British media. And the BBC won't like to be criticised by Danny Cohen. I think it's very brave of him to come out and say this. Now, the BBC spokeswoman has said the Israel-Gaza conflict is a polarising and difficult story to cover, and we understand there are a range of views. The BBC has focused on reporting the conflict impartially, bringing audiences breaking news, insight and analysis, and reflecting all perspectives. While we do not recognise the overall characterisation of our journalism in this report, we will, of course, always look at anything raised with us with care and attention. Right, let us know your thoughts this morning, gbnews.com/your say. But we are going to be crossing over to Birmingham very soon, where the Tory leadership hopefuls are gathered. Is there any hope for the party, or are the Tories effectively toast for the next few years? This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
This Sunday, join me, Camilla Tominey, for an exclusive interview with one of the most controversial, influential and unique political figures of our time. Boris Johnson will be in studio discussing his new memoir, Unleashed, the gripping story of how he dealt with plotting politicians, problematic princes and a pandemic. From Boris bikes to Brexit and everything else in between. This Sunday at 9:30am, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
You could, if you're getting a bit bored later on and you've got some free time, tune in to Friends. Remember that?
It's on somewhere in the world all the time.
Probably one of those obscure TV channels.
It's a big anniversary today, because apparently today was 30 years ago, was when it first hit the screens.
In 1994. Just before, or just after I was born, 89 me. The show ran for 10 series, becoming one of the most popular sitcoms of all time, and it scored numerous accolades, including 62 Primetime Emmy nominations. Joining us now in the studio to talk everything Friends and the big anniversary is showbiz reporter Steph Tetchy and my friend as well.
Happy Friends-iversary, guys. Yes, today is quite a monumental day for one of the most incredible sitcoms to ever hit our TV screens.
That it's on somewhere in the world.
There's millions of people around the world who are watching reruns, watching either streaming of Friends, and it doesn't get boring for people. I think, 30 years later, just that, it's such a simple concept. 6 New Yorkers just following their lives and their friendships. It proved a hit with loads of viewers worldwide.
The casting was superb.
It was so incredible. And the thing is, these were all fresh faces at the time. It wasn't like they picked, people who were at the top of the game then. And I think it was such a hit with viewers is because they became our friends as well over the years. But obviously today is played with a bit of poignancy because, there is one friend that is missing. And the creators of the show, Martha Kaufman and David Crane, saying that today is a bit fraught for both the cast because of Matthew Perry's passing. And he was known as one of the funniest friends, as most people would describe him as. And so today is kind of marred with sadness.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
9:49, this is Britain's News on GB News. I'm at the Tory Party conference. Joining me is the former Deputy Chairman of the Tory Party, Jonathan Gullis, who lost his seat in the carnage, which was the general election on July the 4th. You're putting your faith in Robert Jenrick, who was Immigration Minister. It's all his fault. You did so badly because immigration is out of control and was out of control under the Tories.
What I can say about Rob is, having worked in Westminster with him, to get a hotel in Stoke-on-Trent shut after it was housing illegal migrants right opposite our railway station, a gateway to 6 million visitors each and every year in our great city. It was Rob who relentlessly drove and made sure that Stoke was on that first 50 hotel list to see closed. It was Rob who took the brave decision to resign as immigration minister when he couldn't get the necessary changes. And having met with myself and other colleagues in private to say just how important this issue was, he stuck by his word. And I worked with him on that Rwanda legislation that he obviously voted against in the end. And I admire his courage of his convictions, his belief and his bravery. And he pointed out today in his fantastic speech at his rally for Rob that was held earlier this morning that ultimately the ECHR, we either leave it or we remain it. You can't reform it, you can't tweak it.
So remind people, Jonathan, why it's so important. We're in the European Court of Human Rights. If we withdraw, what difference does that make? Because it's not linked to the European Union, is it? It's a completely separate body. So why is it so important that we leave it?
It's so important because we've got literal terrorists and murderers on our streets, foreign national offenders who we're unable to deport because the European Convention of Human Rights says, for example, that the mental health provision in Uganda isn't good enough for an individual who recently bludgeoned someone to death in the back of an ambulance. We've also got others like terrorists, for example, who were involved in the 7/7 bombings, walking our streets, who are unable to be removed back to Somalia because the European Court of Human Rights has said they should be able to remain in our country. This is just totally unsustainable.
But we could have just ignored the rulings. Other countries ignore the rulings of the ECHR. Why didn't the British government just ignore the rulings and deport these terrible men?
Andrew, I don't disagree that you couldn't just ignore it, but of course there will be repercussions, as the court lays out there would be. And rather than having these fights anyway, rather than having lefty lawyers queuing up to take the government to court time and time again, costing millions of pounds of taxpayers' money in legal fees, and let's not forget these foreign criminals will get legal aid in many cases as well, funded again via the British taxpayer, it means that let's just take this argument and debate off the table. Let's just have the one court, which is the Supreme Court in this country, which exists and perfectly holds the government's feet to the fire, in order to make sure that we can have true accountability within our country, and not some court in Strasbourg with some judge that we've never heard of who is now tiptoeing, and an all assumption himself is saying, no longer being a court, but actually a policy maker. Was it Switzerland recently? They just got they can't even make their own net zero policy.
Look, you don't have to convince me, to be honest, Jonathan. but on this, it will split the Tory party, because there's a lot of what we call the one nation Tories. People like the former Solicitor General, former Lord Chancellor, Robert, it was the Swindon MP, people like Robert Buckland. That wing of the Tory party could break away, it could split the Tory party if Jenrick takes us out of the European Court.
So I would suggest that someone like Victoria Atkins, who's a leading member of the One Nation caucus, is actually backing Robert Jenrick. We've seen Tom Tugendhat himself, long seen to be someone who was pro remaining in the ECHR, now saying if push came to shove, he'd be willing to leave it. And he'll have a lot of One Nation colleagues still backing him. And Rob has shown that he's been able to reach across the broad breadth of the Conservative Party, both in terms of former MPs like myself and current MPs, in gathering support. And ultimately, by Rob outlining a very clear vision of what he would do as leader and Prime Minister of our country, there can be no excuse for the parliamentary party not understanding what his offer is. And if members, and Rob gets the final two, which I believe he will, if Rob wins with the membership, which I also believe will happen, then the parliamentary party will have to respect the democratic wishes of our party. Otherwise, as Rob says, the Conservative Party will be resigning itself to history, and it will be Reform who pick up the pieces.
How are you going to get the public to start listening to the Tory party? Because if I took Robert Jenrick for a walk outside this conference centre and introduced him, they wouldn't have a clue who he is. They wouldn't know who Robert Jenrick is. How does a party with only 121 MPs, you've suffered the most devastating defeat in your history, how do you become relevant, and how do you get people to start listening again?
Well, I think you call out, first of all, this terrible Labour government. The winter fuel payment is exactly the kind of decision-making that absolutely frustrates the hell out of the British public. 1.4 billion allegedly going to be saved, yet they could have reduced the foreign aid budget, they could have stopped sending climate change aid abroad, they didn't have to give train drivers inflation-busting pay rises. So having effective opposition in the House will play its part. Two, having a leader of the courage of his convictions and his beliefs, which Robert has, will also play a huge role.
All right, that's Jonathan Gullis. He's speaking very passionately for Robert Jenrick. Still to come, Prince Harry's due back in the UK today. Hurrah! He's not bringing his wife. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. It's going to be an unsettled day out there today, but the rain should be clearing through Tuesday and then turning a little bit drier and brighter as the week progresses. So we have got heavy spells of rain, and we have got some Met Office rain warnings in force, especially across northern parts of Wales into the Midlands and across parts of Lincolnshire as well, where we've already seen quite significant amounts of rainfall. So disruption is possible further towards the south, turning drier here, but still quite cloudy, and towards Scotland, still holding on to cloudy conditions and outbreaks of rain. Still breezy once again across the English Channel and towards East Anglia, and we still have heavy spells of rain continuing through Monday evening, so there could be some difficult driving conditions at rush hour with travel disruption and also some flooding. So heavy spells of rain continuing across the central swathe of the UK, perhaps turning a little bit drier across parts of Northern Ireland and into Scotland, but on the whole there is a lot of cloud around, still persisting through the night on Monday. So as we go through Monday evening, heavy spells of rain still continuing across much of England and across Wales as that low pressure gradually clears off towards the east. Then we'll start to see clearing skies, especially further west you go, with some clear skies here, allowing temperatures to fall just a little bit, but otherwise towns and cities holding up at around 10 or 11 degrees. So to start Tuesday morning, that low pressure system moves its way out towards the east with a keen breeze down that northeasterly coast. So it's going to be feeling quite chilly here. Still quite a lot of cloud around with some outbreaks of rain, but further towards the west, we should see something a little bit drier with some sunny spells. Still a few showers around, but we may get highs of up to 16 degrees, but chilly down the east. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. On the M1 towards Belfast, there are queues towards Junction 6 at Lisbon after an accident earlier. In Nottinghamshire, the A60 is closed each way along Mansfield Road at Ravenshead after an accident involving a car and a motorbike overnight. In Leicestershire, the A50 remains closed each way along High Cross Street in Leicester. That's been closed since Saturday afternoon because of an unsafe building. Buses replaced trains between Shrewsbury and Birmingham New Street because of flooding. In Bedfordshire, the A421 remains closed in both directions between the A6 and the Marshalleys roundabout and junction 13 of the M1 near Bedford because of flooding causing delays. And in Wiltshire, the A303 is closed in both directions between the A350 and A36 near Chicklade after a lorry caught fire causing delays. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And
the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Morning, 10 a.m. on Monday the 30th of September, live across the UK. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Andrew Pearce, at the Conservative Party conference in Birmingham, and Bev Turner in London.
Good morning, thank you for joining us. So, is maternity pay excessive? Tory leadership hopeful Kemi Badenoch is under fire for suggesting that pay had gone too far, but she says that her comments have been misrepresented.
I've been a Minister for Women and Equalities. I've had 3 children. I've had maternity leave 3 times. I don't need anyone to tell me about maternity pay. I've been one of the people fighting for that, and I won't have my views misrepresented.
And energy price hike. Your energy bills are set to rise by 10% at midnight. Will you be forced to restrict your energy use again this winter? And does Starmer have a woman problem? Rosie Duffield has resigned as a Labour MP, slamming the party for pursuing cruel policies and claiming the lads are in charge. And a mother has launched a legal battle to stop her Down syndrome son's drinks being spiked with sedatives so that he can be forcibly given the COVID jab against her wishes. We're going to talk to the lawyer representing her. And Steelworks shut down. The UK's biggest steelworks, Tata Steel's plant in Port Talbot, is ending production today after 100 years.
Here am I at the Labour Party, I keep saying Labour Party conference, I'm at the Tory Party conference in Birmingham. We'd love to hear what you think. Send your views and post your comments by visiting /gbnews.com, your say. But first, I'm talking to Greg Smith, who is the Tory MP for Mid Buckinghamshire. In fact, we're going to go to the headlines first, forgive me. We're going to go to headlines first. We wouldn't want to miss Mark White with the headlines.
It's 2 minutes past 10. The main news headlines from the GB News Centre. Tory leadership contender Kemi Badenoch has defended comments she made over the level of maternity pay, saying her remarks have been misinterpreted. It follows an interview in which the Shadow Housing Secretary appeared to suggest the allowance could be seen as excessive. All three of her leadership rivals have distanced themselves from those comments, but Ms Badenoch hit back, calling for an honest campaign.
I've been a Minister for Women and Equalities. I've had 3 children. I've had maternity leave 3 times. I don't need anyone to tell me about maternity pay. I've been one of the people fighting for that, and I won't have my views misrepresented.
Speaking to GB News this morning, the Conservative Party chairman said the allowance is not too high.
The Conservative Party was the party that brought in statutory maternity pay, so no, I don't think it's excessive. And I think if you talk to organisations like the CBI, they'd say exactly the same thing.
Meanwhile, the race to replace Rishi Sunak as Tory party leader takes centre stage at the Conservative Party conference in Birmingham today. A day after the former Prime Minister urged the party to stop squabbling. 2 of the leadership contenders, Kemi Badenoch and Tom Tugendhat, will face a question and answer session. James Cleverly and Robert Jenrick, the other 2 candidates, will face questions on Tuesday. And all 4 contenders make speeches on Wednesday before the close of the conference. Sir Oliver Dowden has become the most senior Conservative to face questioning by the Gambling Commission over betting on the date of the general election. The former Deputy Prime Minister is the latest ally of Rishi Sunak to be interviewed by the watchdog. However, the Commission is not investigating Sir Oliver, and he did not place any bets on the election. The Lebanese Prime Minister has said up to 1 million people have now been displaced as fighting between Israel and the terror group Hezbollah continues. Overnight, Israeli airstrikes targeted central Beirut for the first time. The terror group, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, said 3 of its leaders were killed in the strikes. Meanwhile, Hamas said its leader in Lebanon has been killed, along with some members of his family, in an airstrike overnight in southern Lebanon. The UK's biggest steelworks is ending production today after more than a century of operations. Blast Furnace 4 is the final furnace operating at Tata Steel's plant in Port Talbot. From today, it'll be shut down, putting around 2,000 people out of work. The works will enter a transition phase for the next 3 years until a new electric arc furnace is installed. Austria's Freedom Party is projected to win the country's general election after 78% of the population turned out to vote. It would mean Austria has elected its first hard-right party since the Second World War. Party leader Herbert Kickl ran a manifesto promising to crack down on asylum numbers and curb inflation rates. The legendary country music singer and actor Chris Christopherson has died at the age of 88. A family spokesperson said the star passed away peacefully at his home in Hawaii on Saturday. He won 3 Grammys for Best Country Song, Help Me Make It Through the Night, and starred alongside Barbra Streisand in the 1976 film A Star Is Born, for which he won a Golden Globe. The Duke of Sussex is making a rare visit to the UK today to celebrate the achievements and resilience of seriously ill youngsters and their families. Prince Harry will attend the Well Child Awards ceremony in London in his role as the charity's patron, a position he's held for more than 15 years. The King is believed to be spending time at his Balmoral home. It's thought he hasn't seen Harry since the Duke rushed to his father's side after the King's cancer diagnosis in February. And finally, the late Queen and Sir David Attenborough have been named our greatest British cultural figures. In a survey to mark the 90th anniversary of the British Council, the late monarch was voted the country's greatest cultural icon, with 41% selecting her in the survey. Sir David Attenborough came a close second, with 40% voting for him, followed by Diana, Princess of Wales, former Prime Minister Winston Churchill and Queen frontman Freddie Mercury. Well, you're right up to date with all the latest headlines. I'm back in half an hour. In the meantime, it's back to Andrew and Bev.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good morning, welcome to Britain's Newsroom live across the UK on GB News. I am Bev Turner in GB News headquarters at GB News Towers in London. Andrew Pearce is at the Tory party conference in Birmingham. What's the mood like there this morning, Andrew?
Not great. This is a party, Bev, that shattered. It was a shattering defeat, the worst in their history. And they know, despite the huge mistakes being made by the Labour government, they've got to climb the equivalent of Mount Everest. They've got 4 candidates fighting it out. But the big problem when you've got such a small opposition, only 121 MPs, is how are they going to get heard? This was always the problem after the Blair landslide for William Hague. He just couldn't get his voice across. And people laughed a bit at him anyway because he looked odd and he had that odd voice, but that's going to be the same problem for the Tories now. How do they make themselves relevant? How does whoever gets picked out of this, the final 4, get that voice heard and how does the Tory party become relevant again, particularly with Nigel Farage's Reform Party breathing down their necks?
Rishi Sunak chose not to give a speech at conference. Did that strike you as a sensible decision?
Yeah, well, he did speak briefly to the convention yesterday, but he didn't speak for very long. I mean, a blink of an eye, he'd been and gone. Look, there's a lot of anger here towards Rishi Sunak, especially to those MPs who lost their seat. Some of whom I spoke to had lost seats and they'd had majorities of nearly 20,000. They blame one person, Rishi, because he called that election at the wrong time. The Tory party wasn't ready, didn't have the money, didn't have the message, and of course Nigel Farage, far from being in America with Donald Trump, which would have been the case if they'd gone for an October or November election, was there to wreck the Tory party election machine.
Who's looking like the front runner for that leadership position at the moment, Andrew, as of this morning?
I think there's no doubt in my mind. I've talked to 3 of them now. I talked to Robert Jenrick yesterday. He's definitely ahead. He will be in the last 2 for sure. They're all jostling now to see who is in the last 2. We've got Tom Tugendhat, we've got Kemi Badenoch, and we've also got, of course, the former Home Secretary, James Cleverly. It's between those 3. It'd be very hard for me to say which one it will be. Could be Cleverly, could be Tugendhat, but I suspect it could be Cleverly. I don't think it'll be Badenoch.
No, and I think probably not Badenoch, because of course this morning she's having to defend herself from these accusations that she said that maternity pay is excessive. She is pedalling back on that, and she's saying that she was misquoted. I think it's quite difficult to see that as a misquote.
No, she wasn't.
But actually, Jenrick is interesting, isn't it? Because Jenrick is the response to the reform threat. There's no doubt about it. He's not the response to the threat from the Liberal Democrats, who did admittedly well in the last election with their 72 seats. Jenrick would be to appeal to those voters who they've lost to reform.
Without a doubt. And his big pitch is, if we don't leave the European Court of Human Rights, this Tory party dies and the country will never be able to get control of its borders again. That's his pitch. Yeah. So I've got with me in the conference hall now is Greg Smith. He's the Conservative MP for Mid Buckinghamshire. Been coming to Tory conference since 1998.
Yep.
Have you ever known such a poor turnout? I mean, it's like a ghost town.
The conference does feel quiet. Actually, it is reminiscent of those years after we had that big defeat in 1997. But actually, the thing that matters is that members are turning up in slightly greater number to see the contest, to see the 4 leadership candidates in action, to test them before they cast their votes when it gets to the final 2 before the 2nd of November. And actually, to me, what's happening behind me actually plays to the narrative of something we've got to do as a party. We have got to, of course, re-engage with the British people, of course, put out a platform at the next election that excites them about the Conservatives again, but we've also got to reach out to our members, because our members, I'm sorry to say, have been walked all over a little bit in recent years when it's come to candidate selection, when it's come to leadership elections, when it's come to policy development. And actually, if we can really excite the membership again and involve the membership again, give them a point and a purpose to being a member of a political party, I think that's when we can have a really exciting movement again.
And you know, and I've heard MPs saying after the defeat, because of Truss and Sunak, we shouldn't give the Tory party members even a say in who the next leader is. Well, what would be the point of being a member of a party? I mean, what power would they have? That's about the only power they've got.
At the moment, pretty much the only power is that, and if you're lucky enough to select your candidate early, and once the election's called, a bit more say over candidate selection. And actually, James Cleverly, who I'm backing, has put out a big package. And I know to the outside world it's very internally focused around party reform, but actually if we can't get our own house in order first, what hope have we got of actually reaching out and re-earning the trust, or even re-earning the right to be heard by the British people, if we're not a functional party that values our members?
And are the candidates talking to the Tory party here, or are they trying to talk to the country as well? Because it's going to be very hard to get that message out there.
Well, it's got to be both. The first thing we've got to do is we've got to unite, because the number of doors in my constituency on the election that weren't raising particular policy points, although of course GP appointments and potholes and the boats came up, but the number one thing across so many doors was you lot are fighting like ferrets in a sack, you're disunited, you've got so many factions. We've got to come together, and I think James Cleverly is the candidate that can best unite us, put all wings of the Conservative Party back together, and only once we've done that can we begin that long, slow road to re-earning the right to be heard. So it's about talking to our members now, but it's also about getting that pitch right to re-earn trust and just the plain right to be heard by the British people.
If Cleverly wins, or whoever wins in a few weeks' time, Greg, it will be the 5th Tory leader since May 2019. You're getting through one leader a year.
Yeah.
You're turning into a banana republic.
Look, I accept that we've had a lot of leaders, and that is actually probably part of one of the biggest reasons why we
were any of them any
so
good?
badly in July 24. Well, clearly the electorate gave us that answer on the 4th of July. That is now in the past. We've got to learn those lessons. We've got to put our hands up to where we did let Britain down, whilst being proud of the many achievements we did have, particularly around school standards and reading and going up the world league tables for phonics and things like that. But we do have to put our hands up to where we did let the country down and elect someone that can unite us, that can have a genuine Conservative vision based on a smaller state and low taxes and strong defence spending, never forgetting the first duty of government is to defend its population. And James has a big commitment on getting us to 3% GDP defence spending. Then we can go to the country and ask for their permission to lead them again.
Why will anybody trust James Cleverly to sort out the migration problem when he was part of a cabinet which allowed legal migration to be 750,000 a year? That was legal migration.
The numbers were disappointing year on year, but as ever when you leave government, things that we did as a government in the last 12 months start to come good. And actually the number of dependent visa applications, the number of absolute visa applications was falling quite sharply over the summer, and there's no such thing as instant gratification in politics. You take an action and then you get the results of it 6 months, 12 months down the line. I'm not saying it was job done, but if you look at those numbers now, particularly around visa applications and dependents visa applications, they are sharply down.
But those numbers will come down and the Labour government will take the credit.
Yeah.
Another reason why Rishi should never have gone for an early election. If you'd got a chance to have spoken to Rishi Sunak, I said, what would you have said to him politely? No, what would you have said to him behind the scenes?
So it took us all by surprise when that election was called. I'm not going to lie, there was a moderate level of swearing in the office while we watched the Prime Minister call the election on our screens. I think if I'd seen him beforehand, I'd have said, hold your horses. The autumn is going to be a much better time for us to hold this election. But that's gone now. It's passed. There's nothing we can do about that. And we've got 121 MPs left in the House of Commons.
Yeah.
And I feel the weight on my shoulders, along with my 120 colleagues, that we've got to come together, rebuild, unite, hold this government to account, but also come up with a genuine, good, solid, Conservative pitch that can get people excited about.
Just finally, a certain former MP called Boris Johnson has published his memoirs, Unleashed. They include the revelation that he contemplated sending a small platoon of Royal Marines to try and nick some to help us with the COVID crisis. Do you miss him? Do you want to see him back in the parliamentary party? He's a big figure after all, and looking around, there's not many big figures here.
Look, Boris is this enormous personality. He's also become very Marmite in the country. I always got on very well with Boris, although I had some epic rows with him about HS2.
Right.
However, if we're constantly looking backwards, we're not going to be able to move forwards. So I'm sure Boris is going to have a big role in world politics going forwards, but right now it's about choosing a new leader for now and long into the future, hopefully to be the next Prime Minister.
And this man is for James Cleverly. I wonder who you're for. Up next, find out how much money the cut to winter fuel payments is expected to cost the NHS. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're joined by Lewis Oakley and Esther Stanhope. And Lewis, let's start with free gear care, shall we? It's been the story of the week, and apparently it's led to, well, calamity in the polls.
Yeah, so he has dropped by 26 points in the opinion polls. And, I mean, it's just been sort of going down from day one. He didn't even start that high. But, yeah, this is just bad optics. As we say, like, he hasn't done anything illegal or wrong. Everything was declared, but at the same time you're telling people they don't get their winter fuel allowance and you're there walking off with your swag bag. It's just not a good look. And even, I was thinking as well, the optics of them trying to clamp down on MPs having second jobs. Any of those could turn around and say, well, actually, we have to pay for our own clothes. I just think it's just bad optics that he's had. And, we've got those comparisons of Sunak in the stands. He's just sat amongst the people. And
Prince William goes to Villa games, albeit in the director's box, but it's not an 8k per game seat. And by the way, can I just mention, this isn't just an isolated Labour incident. Since the start of their tenure, they were accused of filling the civil service with previous Labour donors, previous Labour aides, people who worked for Labour Together think tank. The civil service is meant to be politically neutral, and they bypassed a lot of procedures to get people into their positions, not least the Chancellor Rachel Reeves, who parachuted Ian Caulfield, his name was, who donated £5,000 personally to her, and then he ended up in the Treasury with a 175k a year job. Yes, he did resign after it was revealed in the Times, but it does make you wonder, you've spent years having a go at the Tories for this, and you do exactly the same thing.
Yeah, it's full of hypocrisy, and also the whole Sue Gray thing, and they were slagging off the Conservatives for not towing the line, and now they're being hypocrites because now they're taking freebies.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom. I am in London and Andrew is at the Conservative Party conference. We'll be going back to him in just a moment, but we are joined now in the studio by political commentator Emma Wolfe and former Labour advisor Matthew Torbett. Good to see you both. Right, Emma, should we start with Kemi Badenoch? So this controversy over maternity pay this morning.
Yeah.
I'm quite pleased we're talking about it because we don't talk about this issue enough. Everyone just presumes that women should just have their babies and maybe go away quietly and not make a fuss about whether they ever want to come back to work. And it is a controversial issue. But do you think she was misrepresented?
I think it's been seized on. I think it's one of those issues, you make a comment. I think partly there's a vacuum of exciting ideas at the conference. Yeah. So anyone saying anything vaguely controversial is going to be seized on. Kemi Badenoch has a way of coming out and saying things that other people aren't saying. But I think she's making, and of course, look, I'm a mum, you're a mum, she's a mum, she's got 3 children. We all want women to be supported. There is no suggestion that Kemi Badenoch is against new mothers or anything like that. But I think she's raising the issue of the burden on small businesses. She's also talking about parental responsibility. She's talking about the responsibility, when you have children, to think about the financial burden that you're taking on, to think about your finances, your family finances. Are you going to be able to follow through? She's talking about small businesses who simply are taking this burden and having to pay maternity pay to women. She's also talking about the fact that she says we're taking from one group, taxpayers, and giving to another group. So I'm 100%, and as is, I think, Kemi Badenoch, in favour of maternity pay. And of course, the other 2 candidates, Jenrick and Tugendhat, immediately came out, we want brilliant maternity pay and paternity pay. Well, it's easy to say that, but can we talk about who's paying for this? What is the burden on society? I think a lot of people, and I'm sad, I think it is probably her Andrea Leadsom moment. It is probably her moment when she's ruined her chances. But I think that she raises a really interesting issue.
Do we talk about this enough, Matthew, about parenting and work, and whether that should be the choice of the parent, whether the employer should have more choice about whether they do or do not employ women of fertile age? What did you make of all the rumblings that have arisen this morning?
I don't think we talk about it enough, and I think, I can think of stories from the other end of the spectrum where people seem to be overworked and underpaid to the point where you hear of cases where people are handing over the children in a lay-by in the car and the next person's going on to work and the families don't see each other, which I think is also a very bad thing for children growing up when they don't see parents because they're constantly working to keep their head above water. I think it's interesting. I don't think Kemi has been misrepresented, and I think she knows that, because ordinarily we see from Kemi Badenoch, she will come out all guns blazing on Twitter and say, no, this is what I said. She's actually reverse ferreted a little bit and gone, I'd like to clarify. Normally she's happy to come out and double down almost. Yeah. I also come at it maybe from a slightly different angle from Emma, in the sense of I think we need to be paying people more to be having children. I think if we're going to be tackling things like immigration and things that people care about currently, and we have the birth rate dwindling at about 1.6 people per woman, it doesn't add up. So if we're going to cut immigration, we need the homegrown people to be coming through of the future to be building a workplace fit for the future as well.
It's such a good point, because Kemi Badenoch has often talked about this and her brand of conservatism, which is that we should be having more children, that women should be having more than the 1.6 children. She's got 3 herself. So if your conclusion is, well, we shouldn't be paying as much maternity pay, but we still want women to have loads of kids, then all you're talking about is going back to a time when women had their babies and stayed at home, whether they liked it or not.
Or that the state actually makes it less difficult. Matthew makes a brilliant point. There is this issue of we need women to be having more children, and many women would. Many families, couples want to have children and want to have more children. But it's such a struggle. As someone who's done it on my own for 4 years, it is, and it's not a pity party, but it's really hard in terms of early years provision, in terms of the fact that if you're not wealthy, the first 2 years you do have to pretty much be a full-time parent. That there isn't really childcare. So I think you raise a really good point, but we need to look at it in a bigger context. Who's paying for this, and how is that burden? Where is that burden going to fall? And if the state wants women to have more children, they're going to have to pick up and help somehow.
OK, well, from babies to our senior citizens, Matthew, this is the story today about the fact that Labour's cruel winter fuel payment cut is going to result in 262,000 pensioners needing NHS care. Labour thought this through.
I mean, you would think so. I've said before, I think this is potentially a case of Treasury brain. There's probably a graph somewhere in number 11 where this makes absolute sense, but the politics of it don't. And I think even if this policy saved us loads of money and we were bringing loads of money in to help the NHS or whatever else, I think sometimes in politics it's not always about the economics, it's about morals. I didn't go into politics many years ago to take people's benefits away or make sure that old people are freezing cold at winter. It's not the right thing. It doesn't feel... I don't feel comfortable with it, and I would hope that Rachel Reeves pulls a rabbit out of the hat and says, look, I've listened, we're not going to do it on budget day. I don't think she will.
But should she change the parameters? Isn't that where it is? Because most of us would agree that if you are a multi-millionaire, you don't need your 300 quid a year. So by all means, take it off those people. It feels like they've just set the bar too low.
Yeah, and I think if there is going to be any give, they will change the parameters and maybe more people will get it. I think at the other end, though, some people don't need it, but that's sometimes the beauty of universal benefits. You make sure everybody's looked after, and if people wish to donate it to a food bank, as I've seen others do, or whatever makes them feel good, or keep it, that's maybe part of the society we live in.
What would it look like for Labour, though, Emma, if she does row back on this come the budget?
OK, U-turns are not popular, but I think in this case it's just so universally unpopular and seems so cruel. It doesn't seem right, as you say. Sometimes in politics it just doesn't seem right. Pensioners, it's such an image. We know pensioners worry about bills anyway. We know that they can't increase their income. We know that there are going to be vulnerable elderly pensioners who are cold and who are not going to turn on the heating, all of that. I'm not even sure Treasury brain was at work here, because when you look at the sums, they don't add up. If everybody had applied for pension credit that should be applying, it would cost more. We're now being told that these 262,000 pensioners, it'll cost the NHS 169 million to treat them when they're ill and getting poorly in hospital.
Because their houses are too cold.
Because their houses are too cold, but it's not just... it's not about the money, this one. It's about people suffering. It's about people desperately worried. Already it's getting cold. Already everyone's going, I'm holding out until the 1st of October to turn on the heating.
Oh, I had it on yesterday.
You had it on yesterday. Yeah, all the men I know have said they've put it on already. And we've had the 10% energy price hike, I think, from tonight at midnight.
Yeah, I think it comes under the same in the Venn diagram as for me, it's similar to the tax on VAT on private schools.
Yeah.
Is that...
we got it wrong.
Within the Treasury, I think they thought it would land well because it appeared to be a punishment on the rich. But actually, this is handled horribly.
Let's have a campaign where because lots of wealthier pensioners do something with that money. They don't need it. They say we don't need it. We either try and send it back or we give it to. Let's have a campaign where people say, actually, I don't need it and I won't take it. That shouldn't be so hard. I don't need it. I won't take it.
What's this health alerts on snacks story, Matt? What's this about?
I mean, I'm sort of all right about it. They want increased warnings on things that may be nutritionally not as healthy for us that they should be. I think the reason why I'm easy is I never pay any attention to them. I don't go, oh, it's got a load of red on it, I better not have this. I'll go, oh, that's quite bad, isn't it? But it looks quite nice, so I'll eat it. So whether it'll do anything, I don't know. But for those that do look at it, you know, I imagine the idea is to save some money for the NHS, and prevention is always better than cure. If people are eating healthier and we lead more healthier lifestyles, that should be better.
Is it like we do with cigarettes? Is it the fact that it's have health warning like you would have on a packet of cigarettes?
Yeah, literally, they're going to slap these warnings on. They're even going to put pictures of tooth decay on the front of biscuits. Look, this is such a clear-cut case of parental responsibility. Anything your child puts in their mouth up to the age of, I would say, 10 or even 12, you have chosen to let them do it. Kids don't just get their money and go out to... They shouldn't be anyway. Yes, there's pest to power. It makes it really, really tough. But if parents don't know by now that crisps, biscuits, fizzy drinks are an occasional treat, they're absolutely a treat, they're a birthday party thing, they are not part of a balanced diet. If they don't know that by now, if they're not thinking that, then these labels on the front of packets are not going to make any difference. There is a reason why we have a generation of children who are shorter, fatter, sicker, but also more anxious, more depressed, more ADHD, more distracted and more unhappy than at any other time, and that's ultra-processed food and people feeding their children junk.
Maybe I have to say I don't mind the idea of some rotting teeth on a Mars bar. They're not going to put some big fat kid on a picture on a packet of crisps, though, are they? You know, is it going to make any difference?
I think what it might do for kids is... I was with my nephew this weekend. It's a nightmare trying to get him to brush his teeth in the morning. He goes, I can't be bothered.
Yeah,
and
nightmare.
You go, well,
nightmare.
You know, and you've all got to do it. Now, if he sees on his Mars bar or whatever he's going to eat, I've got to brush my teeth when they get in after I've had this, because I don't fancy the look of that. The proof will be in the pudding, maybe, we'll see. And actually, I think the only problem is this seems to be a wider reform around things like having no junk food adverts pre-9 o'clock watershed. Kids don't watch TV anymore.
No, well,
they watch TikTok, they watch YouTube and social media, so I don't think that'll work. It'll get round it that way, I'd have thought.
Yeah. OK, Matthew Torbett, Emma Wolf, thank you so much. We've got to go to the news headlines now. Mark White has them just for you.
Good morning. Just after 10:31, the latest headlines from the GB News Centre. Tory leadership contender Kemi Badenoch has defended comments she made over the level of maternity pay, saying her remarks have been misinterpreted. It follows an interview in which the Shadow Housing Secretary appeared to suggest the allowance could be seen as excessive. But Ms Badenoch hit back, calling for an honest campaign.
I've been a Minister for Women and Equalities. I've had 3 children. I've had maternity leave 3 times. I don't need anyone to tell me about maternity pay. I've been one of the people fighting for that, and I won't have my views misrepresented.
Well, speaking to GB News this morning, the Conservative Party chairman said the allowance is not too high.
The Conservative Party was the party that brought in statutory maternity pay, so no, I don't think it's excessive. And I think if you talk to organisations like the CBI, they'd say exactly the same thing.
The Lebanese Prime Minister has said up to 1 million people have now been displaced as fighting between Israel and the terror group Hezbollah continues. Overnight, Israeli airstrikes targeted central Beirut for the first time. The terror group, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, said 3 of its leaders were killed in the strikes. Meanwhile, Hamas said its leader in Lebanon has been killed, along with some members of his family, in an airstrike overnight in southern Lebanon. The UK's biggest steelworks is ending production today after more than a century of operations. Blast Furnace 4 is the final furnace operating at Tata Steel's plant in Port Talbot. From today, it'll be shut down, putting around 2,000 people out of work. The works will enter a transition phase for the next 3 years until a new electric arc furnace is installed. The legendary country music singer and actor Chris Christopherson has died at the age of 88. A family spokesperson said the star passed away peacefully at his home in Hawaii on Saturday. He won 3 Grammys for Best Country Song, Help Me Make It Through the Night, and starred alongside Barbra Streisand in the 1976 film A Star Is Born, for which he won a Golden Globe. The Duke of Sussex is making a rare visit to the UK today to celebrate the achievements and the resilience of seriously ill youngsters and their families. Prince Harry will attend the Well Child Awards ceremony in London in his role as the charity's patron, a position he's held for more than 15 years. The King is believed to be spending time at his Balmoral home, and it's thought he hasn't seen Harry since the Duke rushed to his father's side after the King's cancer diagnosis in February. Well, those are your latest headlines. We'll have more for you in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Now, as you'd imagine, there aren't many lefties here in Birmingham, but up next I'm going to be joined by the king of the lefties, one Kevin Maguire of the Daily Mirror, and I wonder what he'll have to say about Rosie Duffield quitting his beloved Labour Party. What a setback for his great man, Sir Keir Starmer.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Good morning, welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. It's going to be an unsettled day out there today, but the rain should be clearing through Tuesday and then turning a little bit drier and brighter as the week progresses. So we have got heavy spells of rain and we have got some Met Office rain warnings in force, especially across northern parts of Wales into the Midlands and across parts of Lincolnshire as well, where we've already seen quite significant amounts of rainfall. So disruption is possible further towards the south, turning drier here, but still quite cloudy, and towards Scotland, still holding on to cloudy conditions and outbreaks of rain. Still breezy once again across the English Channel and towards East Anglia, and we still have heavy spells of rain continuing through Monday evening, so there could be some difficult driving conditions at rush hour with travel disruption and also some flooding. So heavy spells of rain continuing across the central swathe of the UK, perhaps turning a little bit drier across parts of Northern Ireland and into Scotland, but on the whole there is a lot of cloud around still persisting through the night on Monday. So as we go through Monday evening, heavy spells of rain still continuing across much of England and across Wales as that low pressure gradually clears off towards the east. Then we'll start to see clearing skies, especially further west you go, with some clear skies here, allowing temperatures to fall just a little bit, but otherwise towns and cities holding up at around 10 or 11 degrees. So to start Tuesday morning, that low pressure system moves its way out towards the east with a keen breeze down that northeasterly coast. So it's going to be feeling quite chilly here. Still quite a lot of cloud around with some outbreaks of rain, but further towards the west, we should see something a little bit drier with some sunny spells. Still a few showers around, but we may get highs of up to 16 degrees, but chilly down the east. Bye-bye.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In Dumfries and Galloway, the A712 is closed each way between Balmaclellan and Corsock after an accident. In Nottinghamshire, the A60 remains closed each way along Mansfield Road in Ravenshead after an accident overnight. In Leicestershire, the A50 is still closed each way along High Cross Street in Leicester because of an unsafe building causing queues. It's been closed since Saturday afternoon. In Shropshire, the A442 is closed southbound from the Cuckoo Oak roundabout to the Brockton roundabout at Telford. Buses replaced trains between Shrewsbury and Birmingham New Street because of flooding. In Bedfordshire, the A421 remains closed each way because of flooding between the A6 at the Marshalleys roundabout and junction 13 of the M1 near Bedford. And in Wiltshire, the A303 is closed each way between the A36 and A350 at Chicklade after a lorry caught fire causing delays. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Next Sunday, join me, Camilla Tominey, for an exclusive interview with one of the most controversial, influential and unique political figures of our time. Boris Johnson will be in studio discussing his new memoir, Unleashed, the gripping story of how he dealt with plotting politicians, problematic princes and a pandemic. From Boris bikes to Brexit and everything else in between. Next Sunday at 9:30am, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
10:38, this is Britain's Newsroom. Joining me live in Birmingham at the Tory Party conference, I don't know how they let him in, but they did, is Kevin Maguire, of course, is the Associate Editor of the Labour Party Sporting Daily Mirror. Kevin, you and I have been coming to party conference, I think, well, more years we care to remember. I think this is the number of people here is even lower than in the year after the Blair landslide back in 97, 98.
I think that's right. I've been to bigger Vickers tea parties than this. A lot of MPs have stayed away, former ministers stayed away, people who lost their seats stayed away. Lobbyists on here. All the power was last week at Labour, and the Conservative Party's got very small, ageing membership too.
Yeah.
And they've decided to save their money.
I think perversely, membership of the Tory Party will go up because people will see they don't like what the Labour government's doing, and they'll think the only way. But how does the Tory Party get itself heard? Because when Blair was in power, all powerful, William Hague, the only time we read about William Hague was when there was another row in the Tory party. Yeah. That's going to be the problem whoever wins here.
It is, make yourself relevant, and of course, if you look at the Labour government, it's almost, it's doing its positive things and it's doing its negative things. Whether it's freebies, clothes, winter fuel allowance, Rosie Duffield, former Labour MP, going off with a blistering resignation. Conservatives aren't getting a look in.
No. Now, and a lot of Conservatives I've talked to say Labour are doing so badly, there's great hope for us. But Lord Ashcroft, who was a treasurer of the Tory party, deputy chairman of the Tory party, he's published some really interesting research in the last 24 hours saying, don't be gulled into thinking it's going to be easy, because the Tory party have got such a lot of work to do to regain the trust of the people, because people got fed up with them after 14 years, not delivering on immigration, taxing us to billion and making a mess of the NHS.
Yeah, like his money kept the Tory party afloat after that Blair landslide in 1997, and he's transformed himself now into quite a perceptive analyst, a poll father commissioning lots of research, and he's quite right. He is saying, don't think because Labour are messing up now or on the freebies, on the winter fuel allowance, that will let you off the hook. The Conservatives need to take a long, hard look at themselves. Why did they lose the trust and the votes of people after 14 years? They became directionless, they were squabbling, didn't know what they stood for, were attacked on one wing by Labour and the Lib Dems, on the other by Reform UK. And if they just think, well, Labour's messing up, they won't look at themselves. And he says that's a big problem because the country won't regret booting them out in July. That's not going to change. So they've got to think, how do you win back voters?
Well, it is an extraordinary thing in the last 24 hours. The resignation letter of Rosie Duffield from the Labour Party was one of the most devastating letters. I've been looking at resignation letters for decades. It was devastating. It attacked Keir Starmer personally on a number of fronts. The boys' club. He has got a women's problem. Remember, he was the one who famously couldn't say whether only a woman has a cervix. Ridiculous. Only a woman can have a cervix. She's says the preservation of women-only spaces are important. But I think it was the way she linked the fact that he's taking the winter fuel off the poorest pensioners with his nose so deeply in Lord Ali's trough. Yeah. This is a man, Kevin, he spent £32,000 on clothes from Lord Ali. £32,000 is what a nurse earns in a year.
Yeah, Rosie Duffield's been on a journey away for Labour for some time, because on the actual, we'll call it the trans issue, he's moved closer to her. Not away. She's also made a big issue of not lifting the two-child benefit cap. Well, that wasn't in Labour's manifesto. I think some of the criticism about taking freebies when you're taking away the winter fuel allowance will chime with some Labour MPs, a lot of Labour voters. But she was falling out with her local party. There were some there, I know, wanted to deselect her, but they were stopped.
Are you saying she's a difficult woman, Kevin?
No, I'm not saying she's a difficult woman. She can think whichever way she likes. She's a free thinker. My point, though, and I've argued this for 40 years, if an MP changes parties, I think that MP should fight an automatic by-election.
She's sitting as an independent. I mean, she's not defected to any other side.
No, but she got elected as a Labour MP. Now, I thought this when Tories were defecting to Labour before the last election. It should be an automatic by-election because she was elected as a Labour MP. If Canterbury want an independent MP and they want Rosie Duffield, they can vote for her.
And I think if Rosie Duffield stood against an official Labour candidate, I think she'd win because she'd make it a referendum on the winter fuel allowance.
Yeah, but it would be wider than that. The Greens would probably do reasonably well.
Right.
Conservatives are pretty poorly placed now in that seat. That used to be a Conservative bastion. There's been a lot of demographic changes, but it'd be an interesting by-election. But I just think there's a point of principle. If you are elected under a banner and you leave that banner, you should have to fight a by-election.
Why is Lord Ali so deeply enmeshed in the Labour Party leadership? What has he got? What does he want, Kevin? He's got his period. He's got lots of money. We hear that he was involved in do not top of Bashar Assad in Syria. We know he had his all-access pass to number 10. What does he want? I mean, £32,000 in suits and spectacles for the leader of the opposition, we now Prime Minister. It's a staggering amount of money. What is he after?
He's worth 200 million, or he's thought to be worth 200 million. He's given Labour 700,000. He's become a spider at the
no such thing as a free lunch. Kevin, there's no such thing as a free lunch.
No, of course there's not. It's said that he wants access to power and he wants to be at the top table. Now, a bit of that will always be eagle, and it'll be driven by, aren't I important, aren't I well connected? But you've got to ask what anybody gives, any politician, because let's face it, they are philanthropists.
And you know, one thing's absolutely for certain, Kevin Maguire has not spent £32,000 on his outfits, which he comes to party conference in at all. How much does your suit cost in Marks & Spencer?
You can get a good one for about 120 quid.
£120.
Is yours machine washable?
No, dry cleaning. Mine costs more than £120, but I could not spend £32,000 on suits. It would take me a lifetime. That's Kevin Maguire. He's from the Daily Mirror. He doesn't think much of the Tories. Up next, a mother has launched a legal battle to stop her Down syndrome son's drinks being spiked with sedatives so that he can't be forcibly given the COVID jab against her wishes. That's all coming up with Bev on Britain's Newsroom, live across the UK.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Sports broadcaster Gary Lineker is to cut his pay for Match of the Day. So he's in talks with the Beeb over a multi-year deal for Match of the Day after volunteering to take a pay cut.
Yeah, so he is volunteering £350,000 to knock off his salary. So he'll just be taking home a comfortable $1 million. So, you know, maybe he'll need some clothes donations as well. But you can't really argue with that, can you? I'm sure that money will be spent better elsewhere.
It's still a massive salary, isn't it?
It is still a massive salary. I think the thing with things like this is that I don't know how much of appeal, and, you know, I'm not the biggest football fan in the world, but, you know, how much of an appeal does Gary Lineker have? And when you think of the BBC, where it's not really out to make profit, I really feel like jobs like that should go to young upstarts, young presenters, getting in new talent, rather than paying the old talent £1 million.
Yeah, I reckon, Esther, if you ask Match of the Day viewers, do you tune in to see Gary Lineker or do you tune in to watch the football highlights? They tune in to watch the football highlights.
They tune in to watch the football highlights and fall asleep on the sofa.
Yeah.
They don't care about Gary Lineker and all of his cronies and all of his mates. He gets the same people in again and again. Look, I think, talking about optics, because we're talking about optics today, aren't we, about the clothes and everything. Gary Lineker, the optics, what a hero. That's what he's doing. He's making himself look good by giving back in his way. I mean, absolutely, we want new talent. I would much rather have more voices and different people on Match of the Day. I watch it occasionally with my family. I wouldn't tune in myself that much.
I can never stop.
But they have the same people all the time.
Yeah. To be fair, the plot twist here is that Jermaine Jenas, was that his name?
Last time we were here.
Was kind of like set to take over, or that was the rumour, but now obviously that's not going to happen. So it might have been that Gary was out the door and they've actually said, oh, actually stay a bit longer.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
You've been getting in touch at home. Thank you for keeping me company this morning while Andrew is in Birmingham. Jedi Knight has said, I never thought I would agree with Kevin Maguire, but there should be a by-election. I think that's in relation to Rosie Duffield giving up the whip. Tom has said, does Starmer have a woman problem? Actually, I can't read the rest of that. Sharon has said, yes, Rosie Duffield may have had issues with Labour for a while, but she has obviously had enough of the cruel new policies. That's the straw that broke the camel's back, because her statement just didn't... she did an absolute number on Sir Keir Starmer as she resigned. Personal attacks, political attacks. It was a pretty unprecedented sort of statement. Bag Lady has said £32,000 is the amount that we know about. She says, I suspect it's much more. And this one here saying, sometimes I think maybe the Tories should join up with Reform, and then my sensible head kicks in and says, we do not need the same people that's all but destroyed our nation. I'm not sure we do. I think we're better off without them. Let's be honest, it would be a rescue mission. They would only want to join Reform to save themselves. That's not the right reason to join Reform. Keep your messages coming, gbnews.com/yoursay. Now, a mother is locked in a legal war with the NHS to stop them, and the state, the wider tentacles of the state, to stop them sedating her son who has Down's syndrome. The Court of Protection orders the use of one of 3 possible sedatives, with the judge concluding that Adam is the name that we're giving him, should have the jab because the benefits outweigh the risks. Let's understand a little bit more on this case by a lawyer representing the family, Stephen Jackson. Good morning, Stephen. Thanks so much for joining us. So people will hear this headline and they'll say, well, that can't be the case in 2024. It can't be that a man with Down syndrome is being sedated to be given the COVID vaccine when the risk of that illness is no longer present. So is it really that simple?
We might say so. The hundreds and hundreds of comments in response to the newspaper articles, the Telegraph have run it, Daily Mail have run it, they picked it up just yesterday. They all indicate the public are pretty darn unanimous in this view. It only seems to be a handful of people who are stuck in 2021. What the case is about is that Adam has Down syndrome, he's got moderate learning disabilities and autism, but that means he can hug people, he enjoys tactile response, and he can say if he wants something or he doesn't want something, and he can say if he doesn't want medical treatment, for example. And that's what he does. He recognizes a needle in a picture book and he says, no, thank you. But he doesn't live with his mum. He lives in a care residence, and the authority effectively has control over his care. Everyone seems to have the same objective. I don't criticize that. The objective of the courts and the authorities is to look after Adam in his best interests. But the question is, how is that actually determined? The Court of Protection is supposed to give a voice to the people who don't have a voice otherwise, to respect their dignity. Well, what we have here is that if we look at Adam's risk group, his particular one for his age and his risk group, which isn't really vulnerable, it's just lowest risk group above you and I, about 16% of people in his risk group said yes to the booster shot, as called, last autumn and winter. That's 1 in 6 people said yes. Put another way, 5 or 6 of his peers all said, no, thank you, I don't want this. So how is it that the court or the ICB are telling us that if Adam could speak for himself, if he could better understand COVID, better understand this treatment, he'd be the outlier who says yes? It doesn't really make any sense.
So Adam's mother has come to you for support and for help because she says he's already had 2 COVID injections under this same sedating methodology, and he's also had COVID himself. So she feels this is too heavy-handed and she'd rather not face the risk of an mRNA drug.
Well, he's survived 4 years without the need for any mRNA experimental treatment. By the way, the Pfizer vaccine, so-called, remains under trial until 2029. So most people are saying no. As I said, 16% of Adam's group are saying no. 50% of frontline health workers, I beg your pardon, 70% of frontline health workers are saying no. That's doctors and nurses. 50% of doctors. Across the wider group of risk, so not just, and there's 10.5 million or so, 11.5 million in the UK, 31% said, yes, I'll take the booster. That means more than 2 out of 3 said, no, thank you. So the public,
OK,
the health workers, they're all saying no, thank you.
All right, Stephen Jackson, thank you so much. We're running out of time. I think you've got a fundraiser going as well, haven't you, to try and help the family?
Crowdjustice.com, look at Stop Sedate to Vaccinate. And thank you very much for having me on, Bev.
Thank you. A spokesman for the UK Health Security Agency has said the government body responsible for public health protection said it would be inappropriate to comment on that specific case, but I'm sure you won't mind commenting. Let me know your thoughts. First, though, here's the weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. It's going to be an unsettled day out there today, but the rain should be clearing through Tuesday and then turning a little bit drier and brighter as the week progresses. So we have got heavy spells of rain and we have got some Met Office rain warnings in force, especially across northern parts of Wales into the Midlands and across parts of Lincolnshire as well, where we've already seen quite significant amounts of rainfall. So disruption is possible. Further towards the south, turning drier here, but still quite cloudy, and towards Scotland, still holding on to cloudy conditions and outbreaks of rain. Still breezy once again across the English Channel and towards East Anglia, and we still have heavy spells of rain continuing through Monday evening, so there could be some difficult driving conditions at rush hour with travel disruption and also some flooding. So heavy spells of rain continuing across the central swathe of the UK, perhaps turning a little bit drier across parts of Northern Ireland and into Scotland. But on the whole, there is a lot of cloud around, still persisting through the night on Monday. So as we go through Monday evening, heavy spells of rain still continuing across much of England and across Wales as that low pressure gradually clears off towards the east. Then we'll start to see clearing skies, especially further west you go, with some clear skies here, allowing temperatures to fall just a little bit, but otherwise towns and cities holding up at around 10 or 11 degrees. So to start Tuesday morning, that low pressure system moves its way out towards the east with a keen breeze down that northeasterly coast. So it's going to be feeling quite chilly here. Still quite a lot of cloud around with some outbreaks of rain, but further towards the west, we should see something a little bit drier with some sunny spells. Still a few.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment. This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory. Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark meets and My Take at 10. Democracy is a funny old thing. And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it. Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it. That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
This Sunday, join me, Camilla Tominey, for an exclusive interview with one of the most controversial, influential and unique political figures of our time. Boris Johnson will be in studio discussing his new memoir, Unleashed, the gripping story of how he dealt with plotting politicians, problematic princes and a pandemic. From Boris bikes to Brexit and everything else in between. This Sunday at 9:30 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Morning, 11 a.m. on Monday, the 30th of September, live across the UK. This is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce. I'm here at the Conservative Conference in Birmingham and Bev Turner in London.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us today. So excessive maternity pay, really? Tory leadership hopeful Kemi Badenoch is under fire for suggesting that pay has gone too far, but she says that her comments have been misquoted.
I've been a Minister for Women and Equalities. I've had 3 children. I've had maternity leave 3 times. I don't need anyone to tell me about maternity pay. I've been one of the people fighting for that, and I won't have my views misrepresented.
Another energy price hike. All of our energy bills are set to rise by 10% at midnight. Are you concerned as we approach the winter? And is the NHS on life support? The Chancellor Rachel Reeves is set to put saving on National Health Service at the heart of Labour's first budget. But will more money fix it? And does Sir Keir Starmer have a woman problem? Rosie Duffield has resigned as a Labour MP, slamming the party for pursuing cruel policies and claiming the lads are in charge. And Prince Harry is in London for an awards ceremony later today. Cameron Walker has the details.
Seriously ill children in the UK. Prince Harry, the charity's patron. But will he have time to see his brother or father? Stay tuned.
And working with Andrew Pearce, Monday to Thursday, just isn't enough for me. So you can find out about our Saturday afternoon get-together that we had this weekend at Henley Literary Festival.
And of course, as ever, we'd love to hear what you think. Send your views, your comments by visiting gbnews.com/your say. But first, here's the news with Mark White.
At 11:02, the latest headlines from the GB News Centre. Tory leadership contender Kemi Badenoch has defended comments she made over the level of maternity pay, saying her remarks have been misinterpreted. It follows an interview in which the Shadow Housing Secretary appeared to suggest the allowance could be seen as excessive. All three of her leadership rivals have distanced themselves from those comments, but Ms Badenoch hit back, calling for an honest campaign.
I've been a Minister for Women and Equalities. I've had 3 children. I've had maternity leave 3 times. I don't need anyone to tell me about maternity pay. I've been one of the people fighting for that, and I won't have my views misrepresented.
Well, speaking to GB News this morning, the Conservative Party chairman said the allowance was not too high.
The Conservative Party was the party that brought in statutory maternity pay, so no, I don't think it's excessive. And I think if you talk to organisations like CBI, they'd say exactly the same thing.
Meanwhile, the race to replace Rishi Sunak as Tory party leader takes centre stage at the Conservative Party conference in Birmingham today, a day after the former Prime Minister urged the party to stop squabbling. 2 other leadership contenders, Kemi Badenoch and Tom Tugendhat, will face a question and answer session. James Cleverly and Robert Jenrick, the other 2 candidates, will face questions on Tuesday. The BBC has been criticised in a new report for their coverage of the conflict in the Middle East. The report accuses the corporation of anti-Semitism and making false and damaging claims about the conflict. The BBC management have said they don't recognise the overall characterisation. Former BBC executive Danny Cohen told GB News the corporation was failing in its duty to impartiality.
BBC is a very trusted news source and it has a commitment to impartiality and a commitment to accuracy. And what this report shows today is that the BBC is consistently and systematically showing bias against Israel and failing in its duty to impartiality.
The Lebanese Prime Minister has said up to 1 million people have now been displaced as fighting between Israel and the terror group Hezbollah continues. Overnight, Israeli airstrikes targeted central Beirut for the first time. The terror group, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, said 3 of its leaders were killed in the strikes. Meanwhile, Hamas said its leader in Lebanon has been killed, along with some members of his family, in an airstrike overnight in southern Lebanon. The UK's biggest steelworks is ending production today after more than a century of operations. Blast Furnace 4 is the final furnace operating at Tata Steel's plant in Port Talbot. From today, it'll be shut down, putting around 2,000 people out of work. The works will enter a transition phase for the next 3 years until a new electric arc furnace is installed. Austria's Freedom Party is projected to win the country's general election after 78% of the population turned out to vote. It would mean Austria has elected its first hard-right party since the Second World War. Party leader Herbert Kickl ran on a manifesto promising to crack down on asylum numbers and curb inflation rates. The Duke of Sussex is making a rare visit to the UK today to celebrate the achievements and resilience of seriously ill youngsters and their families. Prince Harry will attend the Well Child Awards ceremony in London in his role as the charity's patron, a position he's held for more than 15 years. The King is believed to be spending time at his Balmoral home. It's thought he hasn't seen Harry since the Duke rushed to his father's side after the King's cancer diagnosis in February. The legendary country music singer and actor Chris Christopherson has died at the age of 88. A family spokesperson said the star passed away peacefully at his home in Hawaii on Saturday. He won 3 Grammys for Best Country Song, Help Me Make It Through the Night, and starred alongside Barbra Streisand in the 1976 film A Star is Born, for which he won a Golden Globe. The late Queen and Sir David Attenborough have been named our greatest British cultural figures. In a survey to mark the 90th anniversary of the British Council, the late monarch was voted the country's greatest cultural icon, with 41% selecting her in the survey. Sir David Attenborough came a close second, with 40% voting for him, followed by Diana, Princess of Wales, former Prime Minister Winston Churchill, and Queen frontman Freddie Mercury. And those are the latest headlines from the GB News Centre. We'll have more for you in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Very good morning. Welcome to Britain's Newsroom, live across the UK with me, Bev Turner, and Andrew Pearce. Now, OK. The reason I'm looking a bit stumbled is because we're doing something a little unusual here on the show. Andrew and I were working together at the weekend as well to promote his book. We were at Henley Literary Festival, were we not, Mr. P?
We were. It was very nice. Beverly interviewed me for the best part of an hour on stage. There was quite a lot of people in the audience about the book Finding Margaret. It was about looking for my birth mother, and she got me to talk about things I've not talked about before. So it was all quite an unusual experience, but very nice experience. And actually, she was very nice to me, which, as you know, is even more unusual.
Stop it, I'm always nice to you. Let's have a little look at what happened at the weekend. I believe they've cut some bits together for us. Here we go. He's going to be on the counsellor's couch here. This could turn into a therapy session, couldn't it? Obviously, you're all familiar with Andrew. You see him on Good Morning Britain every morning, and obviously associate editor of the Daily Mail newspaper. To me, he's just the guy that I have to sit next to every morning for 2.5 hours on GB News.
Which he doesn't like much.
Which I do. But honestly, I think it's fair to say, isn't it? We probably spend more time with each other.
Yeah.
We've both got rather attractive younger boyfriends, and we spend more time with each other than we do with them. So we're doing something wrong, aren't we? 1st of November 1976, Public Opinion. Why I've Adopted My Mum is the headline. I was pleased to read Marge Proops's article, Haunted by the Past. I'm a 15-year-old and I was adopted when I was 2. I have 2 loving, generous parents. For me, my mother is my real mum. The woman who gave birth to me does not exist in my mind at all, and I don't expect I do to her now. My mum has cared for me, fed me, clothed me, and loved me, and I would not swap my parents for anything. Forget the myth that blood is thicker than water. It is not. If you publish my letter, please give my name. I am not ashamed of being adopted. Andrew Pearce, Swindon Wilts.
I got to know Mrs. Thatcher again in her twilight years, and I used to take her to lunch maybe 2 or 3 times a year, normally to the Ritz, and always when we would leave the Ritz, she'd link arms with me because the pianist would start playing a Nightingale in Berkeley Square, and she'd squeeze my hand and say, "Do you know, dear, that was Dennis and our favourite." We did know that, which is why it was always played. And I used to go to parties at her house and see her, and she was just a rather sweet lady, really.
She'd always have the same thing, didn't she?
Always had the same food. It was always lemon sole with the bones taken out. She'd have lobster bisque, 1 glass of wine, because Mrs. Thatcher used to knock it back a bit a few years ago, and it was rather sweet. And it is true that my study at home is a shrine to Mrs. Thatcher. Photographs of me with the lady, photographs, letters from her, and there is also a life-size cutout of Mrs. Thatcher. So on the rare occasions when some lefties come for a drink or for dinner, they're there quite happily having their dinner, and then they turn around and there's Mrs. Thatcher.
It was a really nice opportunity, actually, to really talk about the book as well. And the book is really good. And we're desperate for the second version now, Andrew. We need the sequel to this because it's opened so many different doors, hasn't it, in terms of your family and your history?
It really has, and of course it's I'm here in Birmingham, and of course that's where we found my birth mother, in a suburb of Birmingham, and ironically I'd worked on the Birmingham Mail as part of my career, and my office was just a couple of miles from where she lived, so so many extraordinary coincidences were unravelled by that book. Anyway, Bev, it was great, very entertaining. Now joining me in Birmingham is the former chairman of the Conservative Party, Sir Jake Berry. Sir Jake Berry, Rishi Sunak was in town yesterday. What would you have liked to have said to him if you'd had a chance? Because you lost your seat because of him.
I didn't see him. He was a bit like Banquo's ghost coming back in the play that shall not be named, Macbeth.
Yeah.
People talk about. I don't really know why he came, but the one thing I would have liked to hear from him is sorry. Because I think if you talk to former Conservative members of Parliament like me who lost their seat, the one thing they cannot understand is what on earth was he doing calling that early election? Because, of course, we've seen now things have got worse for the Labour Party. The economy's improving. You never know, we might have got a flight off to Rwanda. And it's all well and good for him to come here and say, now is the time for unity. I actually agree with him, it is. I think it may have been better if he hadn't have come, actually, unless he was going to come and say, look, I'm really, really sorry for... Well, it probably will go down as the biggest political gamble, certainly of our generation.
Yeah.
But it's one he lost, and he should have, he should have said sorry for it, I think.
Do you think he's going to clear off to California, and could you care less if he does or he doesn't? Because he's got a home there, hasn't he?
What he does next is a matter for him. I don't think he will be looked back on as, I don't think we'll look back on him in the Conservative Party like we look back on Margaret Thatcher, for example. So I don't know what he'll do. He's clearly Member of Parliament for Richmond. He said he's going to serve a full term as Member of Parliament for Richmond. I hope he does, because the people who voted for him deserve that at the very least. It's a very odd thing that leaders go, here's still the leader of our party coming, and no one really noticing, I think.
Now, who are you backing in this leadership contest?
So that may be a cheer for them right now in the background. I am backing Tom Tugendhat. And the reason is we've got 4 fantastic candidates, but Tom, to me, is the only person who's come out and said, this is my alternative programme for government. I'm going to cap immigration at 100,000. I want us to look at leaving the ECHR. I'm going to have plans for...
Why doesn't he say we will leave the ECHR, which is what Robert Jenrick has said?
Well, I actually think Tom's is a nuanced approach. Now, I'm a long-term advocate for leaving the ECHR. I think it's the only way. What he has said is, look, when treaties don't work for your country, the first thing is you try and change them. And you can only change it from the inside, a bit like we tried with Europe and failed. And if you can't change them and it doesn't work for Britain, then leave. I think that's a pragmatic political approach to it, rather than just, we'll leave at all costs.
He's also, we're in uncertain times. We see what's happening in Ukraine, the Middle East war, which is ongoing, could get worse if Israel does invade Lebanon. Tom Tugendhat had a very distinguished military career. Would that be relevant to him bebeing a leader of the Tory party?
It's important. I believe, I can't remember the exact number, he spent 20 years serving and working in our armed forces. I think Keir Starmer, when he came into this election, said that he had a history of service as a senior civil servant in the UK government. We sort of learned that it's all about self-service in his case. But I do think there is still a special place in people's heart in this country for people who have been prepared to put themselves in harm's way in our armed forces and in police forces, any uniformed service. I think there's a special appreciation for what they've done. I think also people understand that sort of life and death leadership, when you're leading troops into battle in Afghanistan, is a great training for the high-pressured world of politics. And that's why I think, he's really the complete package, actually.
And he, of course, says he would massively increase defence spending. Can you believe a Conservative government has allowed defence spending to fall so low, so badly? I think the army is probably smaller now than it was during the Crimean War.
Well, look, the world has changed, hasn't it? So we have had this huge dividend that we've spent on the NHS, all the money we used to spend on defence during the Cold War. When the Berlin Wall fell, successive governments took that dividend of spare money, because we didn't need to keep the army in the same state of readiness, and spent it on things that matter to us, like education and the NHS. The world has now changed. It's a very dangerous place. Now is the right time for us to massively look at increasing defence spending to deal with a very dangerous world.
Can I ask you, Boris Johnson's memoirs are out. They've been front page in my newspaper most days. Does the Tory party need a big figure like that? Do you miss him not being around?
I think we absolutely miss Boris. I'm looking forward to support. I'm in there a couple of times. I think there's a couple of bits have been in the mail, talking about some of the crazy things that he and I did together. We're good friends. Just think, if Boris walked into this conference hall today, despite what's going on with the leadership election,
he'd electrify it, wouldn't he?
Most members here would have him back in a heartbeat. And what's really interesting, I think, is if you go out and talk to the public, as I know you do, I do, Sue Gray being at the heart of the Labour Party is rather rehabilitating Boris Johnson. People are saying, aha, I remember this famous Sue Gray.
She did
She's the one who brought
brought him down.
She's always says she was completely impartial. Well, I suppose she might be, because she brought Boris Johnson down, who was a Conservative Prime Minister. Now she seems to be bringing a Labour Prime Minister down as well. So
I know.
that is true impartiality in the British
I know,
system.
and it does feed into people who said that her inquiry into Partygate was rigged from beginning to end, because she's now Starmer's Chief of Staff.
People will make their own mind up about that, but you know, I think Boris himself described it as the greatest stitch-up since the Bayeux Tapestry, in that
I think he did.
memorable way he does.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody would say that Boris Johnson was getting free suits from rich Tory party donors, because I don't think I've ever seen Boris Johnson look smartly dressed in any suit.
No, quite. But I don't know. I mean, if we think about the scandal of a donor through a blind trust, completely anonymously, donating money to refurbish Downing Street, a public building. That building belongs to us, the British people.
He couldn't wear the wallpaper, could he, Boris?
And the wallpaper, which I'm sure is still on the wall.
Yeah.
Refurbishing one of our great national iconic buildings like 10 Downing Street, that is very, very different than a donor giving money directly to, to an individual to buy clothes. And Pat McFadden, who's very, very close to Keir Starmer, was on various television programmes yesterday, and he described them as political donations. Now, that is a lie. We don't use that word much in politics. It is a lie. Political donations go to political parties.
Yeah.
So when I was chairman of the Conservative Party, people would come and see me and say, I want to give a donation to the party. Sometimes they'd say, I'd like to see it spent on this. I'd say, no, look, that's not how it works. It goes into the party funds and we spend it how we want. The Labour Party is very different. This money is being given directly to individuals. Now, GB News viewers would make their own mind up about why any one individual would want to buy clothes for the very senior leaders of our government that we have, or their wives, or provide them with multi-million-pound apartments in the centre of London. Why would you do that directly rather than give to that political party? Who knows? Maybe we'll find out.
We maybe will. That's Jake Berry. He is the former Tory party chairman. He is backing Tom Tugendhat. So we've had three now supported, three of the candidates. The only one to find is Kemi Badenoch. Mind you, we're looking for Kemi Badenoch because we want to ask her what her view is of maternity pay, because she has some rather interesting views on that. Now, the minimum alcohol unit price rises by 30% in Scotland today. Will it be enough to reduce alcohol-related deaths? And is it the business of the state to be raising the price of alcohol? This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
I agree that sometimes a child does need that little break for mental space. If your child's not as academic as other children, school lessons can be quite overwhelming. I went into a maths lesson, actually, and watched the other day, and it was so... I didn't understand it, so I don't know how they cope. So I think that it's not bad to let your child have a lazy day once in a blue moon. I'm not saying have lazy days here, there and everywhere, but it can be good to mental rest and stress relief, and it can get their brains recharged, ready for the next day. Because I've had calls from schools before where my daughter's been very overwhelmed and played up at school. So I've even said to the teachers, you know, I'm going to give you a break tomorrow. I'm going to have her off, recharge her little brain, and then I'll send her back in and she'll have a much better day learning. So that's my view on it.
But shouldn't we be teaching children perseverance, that you have to keep going even when you don't feel like it?
Yes, I agree with that, but you can do that at home. I mean, in a work environment, it's different because you choose to do that job. But if you're in a school environment, there's subjects there that children aren't necessarily interested in, and it can be a little bit boring for them with the subjects they don't want to learn. But I think that it's OK to let them have a lazy day off.
OK.
Just one in a blue moon. I'm not saying take lots, but if my child's worked really hard and they've done weeks and weeks of education, they've done well, their brain's a little bit overwhelmed, then I say have a little rest day, recharge your batteries and then get back in school the next day where you'll be learning more rather than playing up and being stressed.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Very good morning, welcome back to Britain's Newsroom. I'm joined in the studio again by Emma Wolfe and Labour advisor, former Labour advisor, Matthew Talbot. Matthew, just remind me, because you're new for our viewers this morning, you've been on here as a guest, but new as a panellist. Why are you no longer involved with the Labour Party specifically?
Put me on the spot, why don't you? I think I'm too left-wing for the Labour Party and its current guise. I always thought, with the way the polls looked, it would be a nice, natural conclusion to 7 years in front-bench politics to leave, having seen us go into power. I think there was half an option to follow Labour into government, but it's not a project I was 1,000,000% behind, and I had my bugbears with it. So, and I think the media in places like GB News are a great place to try and influence minds and ideas as well, and actually maybe more so than politics. So that's why I'm here.
Do you feel fully vindicated now? You see the struggles that Starmer's having, even in just the course of public opinion, and how his popularity is falling through the floor. You must feel quite smug about the fact that you stepped away.
Well, no, because at the end of the day, I would still probably want a Labour government more so than a Conservative government. I wouldn't say I feel vindicated. I think, you know, I called it 5 years ago and said I didn't think he was a great leader. He wasn't my choice for leader, but I got behind the party and whatnot. But no, I wouldn't say smug. I want it to work. I want us to be moving more, to be more socially liberal than what we are. But no, I hope he sort of turns it round, or if not, somebody more capable comes in and does what I'd like to see them do.
OK, super. Right, Emma, children are being radicalised online. Children under 10 being reported to counter-terrorism police amid fears of being radicalised. Radicalised by whom and about what?
Well, I don't think, you know my views, I don't think children under 10 anyway should be online. I don't think children under 16 should be online. I really think the internet is an extremely and increasingly dangerous place for children. But this is children who are being, well, in a vacuum where children have zero interests, zero hobbies, zero youth clubs, places to go, things to do, interests to pursue. They are finding strong figureheads online. They are seemingly not being parented, not being looked after, not having anyone monitoring what they're actually doing in this internet space, in this dangerous sort of wild west of the online world. And yes, they're being taken over by strong ideologies. It's no surprise at all.
Is it what we would consider to be terrorism and radicalisation, or are they talking about people like Andrew Tate? Or is it anything?
I couldn't tell from the story. It was a little bit vague, but it could be considered terrorism. And I think Emma's right about I worry about a sort of breakdown in society. I even think back to when I was a kid. There were several football clubs I played for. And I know it's a little bit like back in my day, but we all played out together. Yeah. There was almost a sense of community, and I know it's easy to blame social media and technology for a lot of things, but I think we have become more insular as a society. We have become more individualistic, and you know, I look at my nephew now. He has friends or whatever, but it's all about online, playing your Minecraft and whatever other games they play on. So I think it's easy to come, and I think actually the technology companies have to be held accountable a little bit more. You go on YouTube and you type in some sort of thing you shouldn't be looking at. The algorithm on things like that will send you to the next video that's the same, and therefore, for me, things like YouTube are the biggest terrorist recruitment programmes that we've got at the moment, and we need to have a little look about what the algorithms are doing to young children.
But isn't the problem partly, Emma, when we talk about banning smartphones for the under-16s? I've spoken to a few politicians about this. They tend to be older men who don't have this in their life and they just say, oh, they're fine, parents just need to step in. They don't really understand.
You talk to any parent. I mean, you were tweeting the other night about the addiction that your children and you're anti all of this.
Awful.
It is absolutely addictive. This is warping people's minds. I don't care if you think that I'm exaggerating. I am not. The internet is an incredibly clever place. It sucks you in. The guys who've invented all this stuff, they know. And is it any wonder that children are literally in their bedrooms, on their own, in this world like Minecraft, but much darker than that? Is it any wonder that strong ideologies, that powerful, horrible, hateful ideologies, in the vacuum of children just playing out, being with other children, being around people, being in the outdoors?
I've never understood why schools haven't done more to educate children, not just about because what they do educate them on is don't meet someone online and then go meet them in a park because you don't know who they're going to be. The kids, they're not stupid. A lot of the kids now know that's you wouldn't do that. But they don't teach them any skills about monitoring screen time or understanding how addictive it is. It's not just about the content, it's about the functionality between the human being and that device in their hand.
Yeah, no, I think social media should be part of the curriculum, and even that thing you could go further of the fact that anything you put online will stay there now. We have people that may not go into politics because they've left a digital footprint since the age of 13 or whatever age they're going online. And I agree with Emma, actually, that if I was to have children, I would want them to be children, and there is no need for them to have a smartphone. You almost want to keep that innocence about them rather than going out, finding out about the big bad world at the ages of 5, 6, 7, 8 or whatever it might be.
There isn't a family alive that doesn't fight with their kids about screens.
Absolutely.
It's the only thing.
And it's not a failure of parenting or the children themselves. It is incredibly addictive. This stuff is designed to make you want more.
Yeah, it is. And when you know this sort of theory of like they're coming for our children, I hear this a lot of the time, like they're coming for our children, like they've already got them. They've got them on this. What do you mean they? Who are they? And they've already got them via that. Right, can we talk about alcohol? This is minimum alcohol unit price increasing by 30% in Scotland, Matthew. Is this just a punishment on the poor again, who might just enjoy a beer at the end of the week when they've had a tough week?
I would say no. But people that know me would expect me to say that because I'm a recovering alcoholic. So I'm very passionate about things like alcohol harm. I'm not anti-alcohol. I'm anti-alcohol for me, but I'm not anti-alcohol. And I think if you look at the prices that it's going to go up to, a bottle of wine's going to be about £6. It can't be any less than £6, which when I was drinking, when I was quite a bit younger, going out on nights out in Manchester, you pay about £4. So it's not a huge incremental sort of advance on what people were paying. And actually, the interesting thing is it's bizarrely a vote winner. So Alcohol Change did some polling recently on this, I think with a look to the upcoming budget, and they found that more than half of respondents agreed that increasing alcohol duty until it covers the cost of alcohol-related harm would have a positive impact on the NHS. And the one that I thought was more interesting is almost half support minimum unit pricing to prevent alcohol being sold at low prices. That more than doubled for swing voters, and 33% of Reform voters also agree. So you've almost got a third of those types of voters, which stereotypically people probably wouldn't assume, especially with Nigel being the figurehead he is and loving a pint and whatever. But I think there's probably a useful conversation we should have. We shouldn't be punishing people for wanting a drink, but I think certainly more information and maybe more public health around it and more prevention rather than cure.
Yeah, I mean, you're more experienced in this than me, but my worry is that addicts and heavy drinkers will find that money, and we know what happens. They cut back on the household budget. They cut back on even children's food and clothing, whatever. They cut back on their own food. So they will find that money, even £4 to £6, or, you know, a bottle of vodka, whatever, £20. As a former smoker, I know that you just pay whatever for it, because addictions are incredibly strong, aren't they? They're just powerful things like you.
Yeah, no, you will totally find the money.
You'll find that money for booze.
Addicts are selfish. You will put that before anything else. You know, I've got direct life experience of that sort of stuff. But I think maybe, therefore, we need to look at more investment into support services and for helping people in the first place. And I think one thing I was always quite passionate about is there's a memorandum of exclusion in the Equality Act. And people will disagree on this, but I think it's the right thing, in that the Equality Act still sees addiction as a personal choice. Now, I would argue, I would see it as an illness, and it's something that maybe you can't help. If you were to remove that memorandum of exclusion, somebody at work may be more forthcoming in going, I've got an issue, can I talk to you about it? And actually, if you go for a period of rehabilitation, that would be paid for. At the moment, it wouldn't, and you would probably be discriminated for it, whereas something like cancer that you can't help, you would get the paid time off, as rightly so, to get some help and rehabilitation with that.
You must come back and talk to us about that topic again another day, Matthew. Matthew Talbot there and Emma Wolf, thank you both so much for this morning. Right, time for your news headlines with Mark White.
Good morning. It's just coming up to 11:32. The latest headlines from the GB News Centre. Tory leadership contender Kemi Badenoch has defended comments she made over the level of maternity pay, saying her remarks have been misrepresented. It follows an interview in which the Shadow Housing Secretary appeared to suggest the allowance could be seen as excessive. But Ms Badenoch hit back, calling for an honest campaign.
I've been a Minister for Women and Equalities. I've had 3 children. I've had maternity leave 3 times. I don't need anyone to tell me about maternity pay. I've been one of the people fighting for that, and I won't have my views misrepresented.
Well, speaking to GB News this morning, the Conservative Party chairman said the allowance was not too high.
The Conservative Party was the party that brought in statutory maternity pay, so no, I don't think it's excessive. And I think if you talk to organisations like the CBI, they'd say exactly the same thing.
Meanwhile, the race to replace Rishi Sunak as Tory party leader takes centre stage at the Conservative Party conference today. A day after the former Prime Minister urged the party to stop squabbling, 2 of the leadership contenders, Kemi Badenoch and Tom Tugendhat, will face a question and answer session. The Lebanese Prime Minister has said up to £1 million, 1 million people, I should say, have been displaced as fighting between Israel and the terror group Hezbollah continues. Overnight, Israeli airstrikes targeted central Beirut for the first time. The terror group, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, said 3 of its leaders were killed in the strikes. Meanwhile, Hamas said its leader in Lebanon has been killed, along with some members of his family, in an airstrike overnight in southern Lebanon. The UK's biggest steelworks is ending production today after more than a century of operations. Blast Furnace 4 is the final furnace operating at Tata Steel's plant in Port Talbot. From today, it's to be shut down, putting around 2,000 people out of work. The works will enter a transition phase for the next 3 years until a new electric arc furnace is installed. The legendary country music singer and actor Chris Christopherson has died at the age of 88. A family spokesperson said the star passed away peacefully at his home in Hawaii on Saturday. He won 3 Grammys for Best Country Song, Help Me Make It Through the Night, and starred alongside Barbra Streisand in the 1976 film A Star Is Born, for which he won a Golden Globe. And those are the latest news headlines. We'll have more for you in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Up next, join me for an inside peek of the Conservative Party conference hall here in Birmingham. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Hi there, welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Drier weather is on the way eventually, but it stays unsettled at first this week with further heavy rain in places, as the area of low pressure that brought very strong winds and wet weather to the south and west during Sunday tracks across central parts of the UK, bringing a swathe of very wet weather into parts of northern and eastern England and North Wales, as well as parts of eastern Northern Ireland. That's where the heaviest rain will be through these central parts. Risk of further flooding in 1 or 2 spots, particularly northeast England. To the south, cloudy with some showery rain into the southwest of England and gusty winds here as well. To the north, well, mostly fine for northern Scotland, although damp for the Central Belt and into southern Scotland. Further showers to come into the evening across the southwest, drier towards the southeast, but we've still got rain coming down across North Wales, northeast England, into parts of Northern Ireland. So tricky conditions on the roads perhaps at this stage in the day. The Central Belt into central and northern Scotland, it's brighter and there'll be some clear spells, but also 1 or 2 showers and a brisk wind coming in from the east. That wind, though, will be strongest across eastern England as we end the day and go into the start of Tuesday, bringing further wet weather into East Anglia and then eventually into the Midlands as well. That rain will push south. Elsewhere, further west, 1 or 2 showers overnight, but lighter winds, some clear spells. And actually a bright start for Northern Ireland and western Scotland. That's where the best of the sunshine will be during Tuesday morning. It will brighten up across western England and Wales as well. A few showers here and there. But for eastern England, that's where we're going to see strong winds and outbreaks of rain continuing through Tuesday, making it feel particularly unpleasant. Highs of 12 or 13 Celsius.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Party conference, it's day 2. I've got to tell you, this isn't the most widely attended Tory party conference I've seen, but look who I've just bumped into. None other than Lord McLaughlin, former chairman of the Tory party, former Transport Secretary. Lord McLaughlin, you've been coming to Tory conference for a long time. Where is everybody?
I think there's quite a few people around. There's...
You're putting a bit of a gloss on it.
Look, we've just gone through a terrible election defeat. There is not the interest in the Conservative Party that there was a few years ago. So we've got to build ourselves, learn some of the lessons, and get ourselves in a better shape.
Do you think anyone's listening to the Tory party at all at the moment? Anyone's listening to the Tory party at all?
Yes, they are listening. Are we sufficiently important at the moment? No, not until we've got a new leader. And rather than them listening to us, we need to listen to people.
Now, you're a former Tory chairman. Who are you backing for the leadership? Because I don't think you're going to have a no view on this, Lord.
I am having a no view on it.
You're being diplomatic.
I did support a candidate, but Mel got knocked out in the very early stages.
He was so boring. He was never going to win.
No, Mel had done things before he got into Parliament.
Yeah.
He'd built a big business. Yeah. He'd been successful. He'd been a very successful, I think, cabinet minister.
Right.
So I'm very sorry that he's not in the final 4, but he's not. This will be a party vote. I will use my vote when I see who the final 2 candidates are.
Any hunch about who might win?
No. I don't think anybody has they?
And can I ask you, is it true the Tory party MPs are the most duplicitous electorate in Western Europe? They tell you one thing and they tell everybody else who they're supporting. I mean, it is a problem, isn't it?
Well, it's that has been laid at many a Tory member, and there are certain people who I do know who have pledged allegiance to several candidates at the same time. So that's why I'm saying nothing about who I'm voting. But I've got to vote as a party member, like all other party members.
All right, Lord McLaughlin, very nice to talk to you. Enjoy
Thank
the
you.
conference.
Cheers.
We'll carry on walking. We're going to carry on walking this way. We're going this way now to the... we're walking around here. I'm tempted to go and see if I can have some of that whiskey, but it's not exactly my tipple. What's this whiskey for?
A company called Strega decarbonised whiskey using hydrogen.
This is whiskey, which is Tell us about the whiskey.
The whiskey is made with hydrogen, so it's decarbonised. Use it using green electricity. Make the whiskey by splitting water into hydrogen, oxygen, decarbonise. Make this lovely stuff here. Yeah.
Is it legal?
If you're over 18, yes.
Over 18. And does it give you a terrible hangover if you drink too much of it?
Yeah, I couldn't say. I've only had a small dram, so not in measured quantities, yeah.
Is it more expensive than the other stuff?
I don't believe so, no. Competitive prices, yeah.
And is it made in Scotland?
It is made in Scotland. It has to be, otherwise it's not. Of course, yeah.
All right. Good luck with it. Whiskey with hydrogen in. Let's keep walking. You notice they didn't give me a free bottle. Hello, gentlemen. How are you enjoying your conference? We're GB News.
Oh, hi. Oh, yeah, we do.
Do you watch GB News?
I do watch.
Yes, good. Do you watch it every day?
Yeah.
What's your favourite program?
Your program. I watch your
very
program.
good.
And that lady, I keep on forgetting her name.
Beverly Turner. Yes, exactly. So is that your favourite program?
I mean, we are getting used to it. You know.
Okay.
And also watch it most on X when you guys appear on those little snippets or people put other observation. And it's. I mean, I find both. You know, whenever I've got time, I do watch.
And tell me, have you been coming to Tory Conference for a long time?
That's my third one. He's, I think, my first one.
Your first one?
Yeah.
Are you enjoying it?
Oh yeah, enjoying a lot.
What are you enjoying about it?
It's an environment. You know, the turnout. I thought Conservatives only older generation. I can see lots of younger generation. No, that's true. You know, very more younger people this time around.
And who do you want to be the next Tory leader?
Oh, if I say it, you will appear. I don't know. I've got a couple of them. I don't mind. James or Tom.
James or Tom. What about you, sir?
Same. I think James or Robert Jenrick.
All right. Well, very good to talk to you. Enjoy your conference. Lovely to see you.
What's your program? Newsnight as well.
Oh, okay. Very good. But stay with GB News. That's the main one. That's very good. So here we are at the Tory Party conference. Let's find out. We've got some young people here. People say the Tory Party is dying on its feet. How old are you, sir?
I am 20.
20? How old are you, sir?
22.
22? Yeah. Is this your first conference?
Yes, my very first one. I've been a party member for just over a year.
Right. And what about you, sir?
This is my third conference.
Third conference.
Yeah.
Have you decided Have you decided who's going to be the next leader?
Yes, Tom Tugendhat.
Same question to you.
I haven't decided yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why Tom Tugendhat?
He's a man of honesty and integrity, and his years of service in the military will prove that he's got what it takes to lead us into the next government and be the next Prime Minister.
There we are. Vote for Tom Tugendhat. OK, lovely to talk to you. Look, we're at Tom Tugendhat's stand here. But can I say to Tom, look, what can we get at Tom Tugendhat's stand? Look, here we are, Tom Tugendhat's stand. For Keir's tears. For Keir's tears if Tom is elected. Well, I think that's pretty good, because most of this stuff is tack, to be honest. It's they call it merch, but I think the Tugendhat stand probably wins the most. TCM, and then we've also got sweets, and he's also got, has he got his own newspaper? Have you got your own newspaper here? What's it called? It's called the Daily Tugen Chat, but where is the biggest selling virtue here? Where is the fake tan? You've sold out a fake tan? Not even one bottle? Come on, Tom Tugendhat has on his stand fake tan. Exactly. I don't think politicians should ever talk about fakery, really, do you? But there we are. Good luck with your campaign. We're just going to carry on walking round. We're probably there's lots more people here than I probably thought. We just bumped into a photographer. We're bumping into another camera crew here. So we're just going to walk. No, we're going to stop that way. So we are now going to go back to London. We're going to go back to Beverly Turner, because that's it from me here at Birmingham. You'll hear from me more a little later. A break now. I think we're going to get the weather or something like that.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
My next guest is a composer and film director whose musical journey began at the tender age of 4.5 when he started playing the piano. Under the tutelage of luminaries such as Sir George Benjamin and Sir Harrison Birtwistle, he has honed his craft, primarily grounding himself in the classical world. He's written music in sets of composition in the 24 major and minor keys of the chromatic scale, producing an album which is accompanied by 24 videos, and it's called 24. I'm joined now by Fabio D'Andrea. Fabio, great to see you. Tell me a little bit, I'm a layman when it comes to music, tell me a little bit about how a composer chooses a key and what it means to the composer to have chosen the key.
Sure. Well, I think every musical key, and there's 24 of them, major and minor, they have their own feel. So you could play a piece in, say, C major, which is normally regarded as the simple key, it's all the white notes on the piano. But if you play that piece, say, in A flat major, it's going to have a very different feel. So I decided to create this project, 24 pieces, again, looking back at our traditions and the history of what composers have done in the past, especially in regards to piano music, and explore every key, see if I could bring out the emotion that you feel from that actual key itself.
Were you fonder of some than others? I imagine, for example, you're not so fond of C because it's too straightforward.
Actually, no, I love all of them. And that's the beauty of music. Every key has its own feel. And some keys are associated with different feelings. So, for example, C major has actually been historically associated with victory. It's quite a victorious feel about it. I love D flat major. That's quite mellow. But every key has its own special feeling. And sometimes something will just sound different in that one key, and it's meant to be in that key. So for me, this has been a whole exploration of that.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, 11:47. This is Britain's Newsroom. What have you been saying at home this morning? We started the show, it feels like a long time ago now, talking to Danny Cohen, former director of BBC One, who has basically authored a report saying that the BBC does not handle the Middle East conflict with impartiality. Alison has said, I totally agree, I'm not Jewish. But I turn off the BBC News now because of their obvious one-sided reports on the Middle East. They never show anything relating to the Israeli side. It's very one-sided. And the bias has been shown by other news reports. And Jim says the BBC recruits almost exclusively from the pages of The Guardian. They can't help themselves. Northeast Boy says then they should have their licence fee removed. If they cannot be an unbiased organisation, which they can't, they have no place taking taxpayers' money. And Marilyn says, I recently couldn't get GB News. Sorry to hear that, Marilyn. And I was forced to watch the BBC News. It was when the Hezbollah leader was killed. I have never seen anything so biased on TV before. It was disgusting. It was all about calling Israel the perpetrators of the whole war. There we were shocked. And on Kemi Badenoch having to defend herself this morning against accusations that she said in an interview that maternity leave is excessive. Dennis has said, I think it's the media that is against Kemi. She's had 3 children. Do you not think she knows what she is saying? And Paul says, yep, well, 3 cheers for Rosie Duffield. Don't let this story get buried because that's how it feels to me. Thank you for reminding me, Bev. That's a really good point. Because that broke over the weekend when we weren't on, I don't feel like that's had as much publicity as it might have done, Rosie Duffield leaving and giving Keir Starmer such kicking on the way out. Now, moving on. The prodigal son has returned. Prince Harry has landed in the UK as he prepares to attend the Well Child Charity Awards today. There's no sign of Meghan. The Duchess has stayed at home in California. Let's talk now to GB News Royals correspondent Cameron Walker, who's here. Cameron, so what is he doing here and what is his diary going to look like? Who is he going to see? Is he going to see his dad?
I suspect it's going to be a very short in-and-out visit. He's been patron of the Well Child Awards, a charity in the UK looking after seriously ill children for 16 years. He's attending their awards ceremony in London tonight. He'll be presenting one of those awards to a child, most inspirational child, aged between 4 and 6, and he'll also deliver a short speech. But, of course, a lot of the headlines are, well, who's he staying with? Who's he going to be seeing? Is there going to be any reconciliation? And the answer is, to be honest, we really don't know. Any source you speak to close to the Duke of Sussex, you're met with silence. And similarly, any source close to the King or Prince William, you're also met with silence. Quite interesting, really. Some people suggesting that maybe this is going to be a test for Prince Harry if he does actually see his father or his brother, although I doubt it. But if he did, is there going to be any leaks to the media? That could be potentially a test. The King, we believe, is in Balmoral at the moment, so he's in Scotland. So logistically, it would be quite challenging for the two of them to see each other. Prince William a lot closer, but we know that their relationship isn't great. We don't think they spoke in August when Prince Harry was last in the UK for the memorial service for their uncle, Robert Fellows, although they were in the same room for, you know, the best part of an hour. They didn't see each other. So I suspect probably not. And also, where's he going to be staying?
Yeah.
Maybe a hotel? Maybe Buckingham Palace? Don't think it's going to be Buckingham Palace, though, although he was offered a room there in May and turned it down, reportedly.
Is it normal that they wouldn't say where a royal would be staying on an occasion like this? Or would you, as the royal correspondents, normally get a bit of a heads up?
I think if they're a working royal, we'd get a heads up. But I think because Prince Harry isn't, and there's security issues surrounding Prince Harry clearly at the moment, they're not going to give us that kind of information. Also, he has to give the Home Office 28 days notice before he returns to the UK, so he can get a level of police protection while he's here. But we do know, of course, that there is still a legal battle going on. He's going to appeal that decision that his security was downgraded. That's the reason why Meghan isn't here, actually, and it's Prince Harry solo, because Harry told an ITV documentary a couple of months ago that he doesn't feel safe bringing Meghan to the UK. He's really worried for her security, but, I mean, you know, that's just kind of one side of a story. Perhaps the police would say different.
Netflix aren't very happy with them, are they, about this Polo documentary, that there isn't really a lot of Harry in it, apparently?
Yeah, it looks like he's been kind of exec producing it. So I suspect he will appear in the documentary. All we've got officially from Netflix is a couple of stills of the images of the polo field in California, and we know Harry and Meghan actually attended some polo matches recently over the summer. So I think we'll see them in a kind of fly-on-the-wall style situation. But in terms of are we going to see Harry or Meghan interviewed as part of this documentary? Probably not. And that's probably the selling point for Netflix, is Harry and Meghan. They've paid millions and millions of pounds, reportedly, to the couple to produce and create content of the two of them. Clearly, the box office for them was them spewing their beans on them being working members of the royal family back in December 22, or, well, the advert came out December 22. I think it was early 2023 that documentary came out. But yeah, that could have been the most exciting thing for them. So a polo documentary and whatever Meghan's working on with Netflix, the cooking show reportedly, is it going to reap the same rewards for Netflix? We'll have to wait and see.
Because Netflix will only have so much patience with them. You know, they will only keep employing them if they're going to generate profit for the company. Maybe Harry and Meghan haven't worked out that. Yeah. That if you make yourself the product, just you and your personality and your history and your life, you can't then just pivot to executive produce something that you're not in.
And is the contract going to be renewed? That's the other thing. And they have a huge security cost in the US as well, because they have to privately fund their own security team there and a massive $11 million mansion in Montecito. It's a lot of money. It's a very luxury lifestyle. And the question is, how will they continue to afford it?
OK, Cameron, thank you so much. Right, that is it from Britain's Newsroom for today. Up next, Good Afternoon Britain with Emily and Tom. Here they are.
It is indeed, and Tom Harwood is, of course, at the Conservative Party conference up in Birmingham. We'll be checking in with him at the top of the show. Who's standing out for you? Which Tory leadership hopeful is going to win in your view? Are you interested? What do you make of it all? That's what I want to know today. And also, Keir Starmer, he's attempting to draw a line under Freebiegate, isn't he? The rules are going to change on how you declare and when you declare donations and gifts. Is that really the point, or is it that they're accepting so many in the first place? And, of course, we're going to be talking about the BBC because there's a new report out on bias. All of that 12 till 3 on Good Afternoon Britain.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. It's going to be an unsettled day out there today, but the rain should be clearing through Tuesday and then turning a little bit drier and brighter as the week progresses. So we have got heavy spells of rain and we have got some Met Office rain warnings in force, especially across northern parts of Wales into the Midlands and across parts of Lincolnshire as well, where we've already seen quite significant amounts of rainfall. So disruption is possible. Further towards the south, turning drier here, but still quite cloudy, and towards Scotland, still holding on to cloudy conditions and outbreaks of rain. Still breezy once again across the English Channel and towards East Anglia, and we still have heavy spells of rain continuing through Monday evening, so there could be some difficult driving conditions at rush hour with travel disruption and also some flooding. So heavy spells of rain continuing across the central swathe of the UK, perhaps turning a little bit drier across parts of Northern Ireland and into Scotland, but on the whole, There is a lot of cloud around, still persisting through the night on Monday. So as we go through Monday evening, heavy spells of rain still continuing across much of England and across Wales as that low pressure gradually clears off towards the east. Then we'll start to see clearing skies, especially further west you go, with some clear skies here, allowing temperatures to fall just a little bit, but otherwise towns and cities holding up at around 10 or 11 degrees. So to start Tuesday morning, that low pressure system moves its way out towards the east with a keen breeze down that northeasterly coast. So it's going to be feeling quite chilly here. Still quite a lot of cloud around with some outbreaks of rain, but further towards the west, we should see something a little bit drier with some sunny spells. Still a few showers around, but we may get highs of up to 16 degrees, but chilly down the east. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We love luck.
This Sunday, join me, Camilla Tominey, for an exclusive interview with one of the most controversial, influential and unique political figures of our time. Boris Johnson will be in studio discussing his new memoir, Unleashed, the gripping story of how he dealt with plotting politicians, problematic